Hi, welcome back guys. This is your sensei, back with another fanfiction. This is the first part of What If Naruto Had a Deck of Legendary Heroes? Now before starting, please give this video a like and subscribe to the channel if you want more videos like this. Now let's get into the fanfic. Back to Naruto. A young blonde-haired boy stood alone, holding a katana marked by the signs of battle, and looked down at Sasuke Uchiha, who lay on the ground, defeated by Naruto. Naruto felt the weight of it. He apologized to Sasuke in his heart, believing Sasuke had gone too far and that it was time to end the conflict. He was exhausted from confronting the traitor of the Uchiha clan, and Sasuke had been unable to withstand Naruto and his allies. Naruto had not acted alone. Artoria, Jean, Medusa, Gawain, Lancelot, and Mordred had all joined him in the confrontation because Sasuke sought vengeance against Itachi for what had been done to his family. The group had taken the fight to him, but everyone knew that violence would not resolve the deeper pain. Artoria told Naruto that there was nothing more to be done and that he had done what was necessary to stop Sasuke. Naruto stood in stunned regret, unable to fully accept that he had killed his best friend. Mordred asked why Naruto cared about someone she called a traitor, challenging him sharply and questioning his mercy. Naruto began to explain that he cared because of what Sasuke had once meant to him, but Mordred dismissed the sentiment as a betrayal of trust and loyalty. Gawain reprimanded Mordred and urged restraint, telling her not to provoke Naruto further. Mordred only shrugged, unconcerned. Lancelot reminded Naruto that this was a war and that he had to face the harsh realities on the battlefield. Before Naruto could respond, an explosion rang out in the distance. The group turned and saw a larger battle unfolding. Gilgamesh, Enkidu, Siyu, Ishtar, Pestilence, and King Hassan had engaged a powerful adversary, the goddess Kaguya. The clash was fierce and sweeping. Jean and Medusa urged everyone to get Naruto to safety. They moved quickly, taking him away from the front lines before the fighting could reach them. Time passed. Back to Kaguya. When the figure crashed to the ground under the shockwave of a falling crate, the goddess gritted her teeth and struggled to rise. She felt intense pain from the servant's impact and realized her regenerative power was faltering. She wore a white outfit, had pale skin and white eyes, and though no one knew her true name at first glance, she had lived among humans for centuries. Her name was Kaguya, the goddess of love and hate. Kaguya fought to steady herself as the damage from a strike across her chest left her reeling. Fury flared within her at the golden-haired man in gleaming armor who hovered before her, arms crossed and a knowing smirk on his face. That man was Gilgamesh, the king of heroes, accompanied by his old friend Enkidu, who floated beside him. Oda Nobunaga, claiming the mantle of the true demon king, was with them as well. Gilgamesh taunted Kaguya, asking what she would do now. Kaguya answered with defiance, insisting she would not allow merely human opponents to win and vowing to fight them to the end. Enkidu asked what she intended next, and Kaguya declared she would reveal her true nature. Oda laughed and mocked her, dismissing Kaguya's threat and claiming superiority. In response, Kaguya unleashed a transformation, her form shifting into a monstrous silhouette as several tentacles sprouted from her back. The three servants reacted with derision, dismissing the change as unimpressive and trading barbs about the appearance of her new form. Before Kaguya could press her assault, a cold, commanding voice cut through the chaos. The legendary figure known as King Hassan appeared, a towering presence clad in horned, skull-like armor, his eyes burning with blue flame and a great sword wreathed in the same eerie light in his hand. The sight of him spread a chill through those nearby. Gilgamesh stepped back and left Hassan to confront Kaguya alone, and his companions withdrew to give Hassan space. Kaguya felt an unfamiliar fear at Hassan's arrival and tried to push it aside as she turned to face him. Hassan observed her, questioning the certainty of her role as Demon King and reminding her of the lives she had taken. He declared that her path of slaughter must end and that he would show her the true terror of death, invoking the victims she had left behind, including Naruto's family. With that, King Hassan unleashed his noble phantasm. A focused, overwhelming force of cold, consuming energy surged toward Kaguya, and she braced herself as the attack struck, her failing regeneration struggling against the onslaught. The battlefield trembled under the clash as the two forces collided in a dramatic, non-graphic spectacle of power. Kaguya began to speak, but a sudden, massive slash cut through the air. The blow struck the goddess, her form unraveling into a burst of light before vanishing. Kaguya stood frozen, stunned into silence. Silence fell across the battlefield. To be continued. Siyu Chulin. Amiya, archer. Amiya, assassin. Castor Gilgamesh. Enkidu. Hercules. Leonidas. Knight of Round Tables. Hassan of 100 Faces. Achilles. Chiron. Karna. Arjuna. Billy the Kid. Spartacus. Ashwatthama. Pestilence Pale Rider. To be continued. Present in the village of Konoha, a 13-year-old Naruto Uzumaki trudged through the streets, frustrated that his pranks never seemed to work and that he had been reprimanded by a teacher. He had failed his exams and felt cut off from the fun he craved. Dressed in an orange tracksuit, sandals, and with spiky blonde hair, blue eyes, and whisker-like marks on his cheeks, Naruto walked with a heavy expression. Villagers stared at him with open dislike he could not understand, and he wondered why they judged him when he had done nothing to them. He did not yet know the full reason for their hatred. Naruto remembered what teacher Mizuki had told him: steal the scroll from the temple and give it to Mizuki, and he would be given a second chance to become a ninja. He planned the theft as he walked, then climbed a tree to rest and think. He wished for a normal life, free of scorn and loneliness, and soon dozed off. A box fell from an opening in the tree and landed on his chest. Startled and rubbing his face, Naruto examined the strange container. Inside were several cards and a note filled with confusing information about servants and classifications: sabers, lancers, archers, berserkers, rulers, assassins, casters, and a mysterious category called moon cancers. The material seemed to describe some kind of system he did not understand. Overwhelmed by how much there was to take in, Naruto tucked the cards away and checked his watch. He realized he had to act before the time ran out if he was going to follow Mizuki's plan. Later that evening, Naruto slipped out and ran toward the temple where the scroll was kept. The site was quiet and empty, which made him more determined. He entered and managed to take the scroll. At that moment he felt something touch his hand. One of the cards he had found had come loose and vanished from his grasp in an instant. He cried out in surprise. Teacher Irika arrived moments later, furious, and seized Naruto by the collar. Irika demanded to know what Naruto thought he was doing and shook him while trying to get answers. Naruto insisted that teacher Mizuki had sent him on a task and that stealing the scroll was supposed to be his chance to become a ninja. As the two argued, teacher Mizuki called down from the tree and taunted the situation, revealing himself at the perfect moment. Chapter End. Edmond Dantes. Shinjuku. Darius III. Astolfo. Charlemagne. Hessian Lobo. Lancelot, Berserker. Red Hair. Mori Nagayoshi. Asterios. Xiangyu. Ingramenyu. Artemis and Orion. Adoptive daughters, Jack the Ripper. Nursery. Chloe. To be continued. Third-person POV. Previously in Naruto's deck of heroes. Naruto could hardly believe his eyes when a girl stood before him, composed and alone. He listened as Artoria Pendragon asked whether he was her master. Artoria asked him whether he was her master. Naruto stammered that he did not understand. Artoria asked him again whether he was her master, and as Naruto tried to answer he felt a sudden heat in his left hand. He looked down and saw his hand glowing with a sigil he did not recognize. Naruto exclaimed in surprise at the mark, realizing it resembled a command seal. Artoria concluded that he was her master and explained that she was Saber, his sword knight, sworn to follow his orders. Naruto's surprise deepened until Mizuki interrupted the moment with a furious outburst, accusing Naruto and threatening to kill them. Mizuki charged. Artoria blocked his downward swing with an invisible blade, much to Mizuki's astonishment. She declared that she would not allow him to hurt her master, and the confrontation escalated into a fierce, fast-paced battle with the style of an animated clash rather than a melee of gore. Mizuki lashed out in rage, but Artoria's precise strikes disarmed him and left him reeling. He attempted to escape using a smoke device and leapt to a higher position, preparing another attack with a kunai, only to be met by a swift counter that impaired his ability to fight. He was pinned against a tree and rendered unable to continue, clutching at his shoulder in shock. Two additional presences arrived as Naruto and Iruka watched in confusion. A young man with wild azure hair holding a red spear, and a tan-skinned man with white hair bearing a bow and sword. The first introduced himself as Siyu Chulain and the second as Amiya, and they identified themselves as servants aligned with Naruto. Iruka, coughing and trying to stand, was aided by yet another ally who had appeared, Leonidas, who urged Iruka to conserve his strength and assured him he would be all right. Naruto glanced back to see Artoria close in on the incapacitated Mizuki and deliver a final, decisive blow that ended the threat without graphic detail. Mizuki fell unconscious and the immediate danger passed. Naruto, kneeling and looking down, reflected on the villagers' hatred and the accusations that had followed him. He acknowledged that they had labeled him a monster or a demon, but he also said that he understood why they feared what they did and did not blame them. Artoria told him not to listen to such insults and insisted that he was not the beast they claimed. Iruka reminded Naruto that he was Naruto Uzumaki and that Iruka was his teacher, offering support in that stead. Amiya told Naruto that he had been given a second chance. Naruto heard this and nodded, and they began to leave until Amiya sensed enemy presences and readied his weapon. Amiya warned that they had company. The servants took fighting stances to protect their master. 20 Kamui ninjas appeared, masked and waiting for the newcomers to move. The servants at first underestimated the masked ninjas, but Amiya noted that they were far deadlier than they looked and could overwhelm any opponent. The Hokage, leader of Konoha, then arrived. He surveyed the damage and instructed that Mizuki's body be removed, saying they would continue the conversation in his office. Time skip. In the Hokage's office, Naruto sat with Leonidas, Artoria, Siyu, and Amiya. Artoria and Amiya stayed close to guard him. The Hokage opened the discussion. Leonidas asked that the village guards be dismissed so the servants could speak privately. The Hokage agreed and sent them away. The servants explained that they were Naruto's protectors and guardians and would not allow anyone to harm him. Leonidas warned the Hokage that if villagers endangered Naruto, they would intervene decisively. The Hokage listened, visibly uneasy at the servants' seriousness, and promised to consider their concern. When asked, Artoria introduced herself as Saber, Siyu identified himself as Lancer, Leonidas confirmed his name, and Amiya as Archer. After giving their names, the servants returned to their astral forms and left Naruto alone with the Hokage. The Hokage discussed Naruto's progress and reported that he had earned a B+, thanking Iruka and others for their help. To be continued. Third-person POV, at night. Naruto walked home exhausted and in need of rest after the day's betrayals and confrontations. The servants warned him to be cautious. Siyu reminded him to stay vigilant and continue training. Artoria commented on the village's lack of loyalty. Kyoheim vowed retribution if anyone harmed their master, while Amiya urged restraint and insisted they must be certain who was truly hostile. Oda insisted that the troublemakers needed to be taught a lesson. Naruto, weary, asked them to stop arguing and said he needed sleep before school the next morning. With their cautions lingering, he went home and went to bed. Outside, 6 villagers waited in an alley, planning to confront Naruto. One declared they would kill the demon for what he had done to the village, another worried about punishment from the Hokage. One man raged that he had lost his family and demanded retribution. They argued until one of them heard a faint sound and asked if anyone else had noticed it. The others denied hearing anything, but then the group froze in terror at the sight of a pale, bird-masked figure appearing ahead. The masked presence filled them with dread, and the 6 attackers retreated, stunned by what they had seen. The mask opened and a flock of shadowy birds spilled out, sweeping over 6 attackers. The creatures struck with uncanny speed. 5 of the attackers collapsed and did not recover. The 6th crawled away, calling for help, but a servant moved in silently and neutralized the threat without fanfare. When the figure stepped forward, she revealed herself as one of the servants, a kunai in her hand. She issued a terse warning and then left. The fallen assailants lay where they had fallen, and the servants had made it clear they would protect their master. The villagers had no idea what was coming for them. Worse nightmares lay ahead. The next morning Naruto woke with a gasp, jolted upright in bed. He rubbed his head and blinked as lingering flashbacks lingered at the edge of his mind, fragmented battlefield memories that belonged to the servants he had glimpsed. He could not make sense of the visions, and the sense that something deeper and more mysterious waited in those memories unsettled him. Footsteps approached. Naruto turned and saw Kyohime enter, her light green hair and small white horns setting off the pale blue kimono she wore. She greeted him warmly and asked after his well-being, explaining that she had prepared breakfast. Naruto told her he was fine and thanked her. He rose, stretched out the stiffness of sleep, and felt better as he left the bedroom. At the table a small girl with short white hair and a black cloak sat watching. She had a narrow scar on each cheek. When she noticed Naruto awake, she leapt up and ran to him, embracing him tightly and calling him mother in a burst of excitement. Naruto immediately recognized her as Jack, a child he had known from the streets, someone who had endured a hard life with no family. He asked if she had slept well, and Jack replied that she had and that she wanted to spend the day playing. Naruto invited her to sit and eat. Kyohime placed 3 plates of breakfast on the table, for Naruto, Jack, and herself, and urged them to eat well. The food was simple but delicious, and the small household settled into a calm morning. Time passed, and soon Naruto found himself back at school. Irika stood before the classroom, unsettled by the events the previous night and curious about the newcomers. He wondered where Naruto's newfound strength had come from, and remembered that Naruto had witnessed his childhood friend fall to Artoria in a sudden, brutal encounter. That memory weighed on him. A student asked Irika if anything was wrong. Irika assured them and then announced that Naruto had passed the examination with a B+, noting that Naruto had developed a remarkable summoning technique. Before he could elaborate, the classroom's door was blown inward. Everyone froze as a newcomer strode into the room, a young woman clad in armor, carrying herself like a knight. She announced that this was the classroom and that they had arrived on time. Naruto entered behind her, flanked by Leonidas, and the other students stared in stunned silence at the unexpected arrivals. They wondered who the 2 newcomers were. Naruto thanked the pair with a nod, then walked toward an empty seat beside Sasuke. As he passed Sakura, her frustration boiled over and she lashed out with a few sharp, angry jabs. She had reached the limit of her patience. Sakura called Naruto an idiot in a heated outburst, but the moment of tension was shattered when a newcomer named Jack suddenly appeared, drawing knives and pointing them threateningly at Sakura. The classroom went silent as Jack's cold glare and vicious words conveyed that he and his mother were furious and intended to punish Sakura for something she had done. The threat was terrifying to everyone present. Irika braced himself, and Naruto stepped forward to defuse the situation. Naruto reminded Jack that knives had no place in the classroom because they were at school. Jack acknowledged the warning and faded away in a shimmering astral form, leaving the students confused and shaken. Irika then turned to Naruto and asked if there was anything else to report. Naruto replied that he was all right now that the immediate danger had passed. Later, Irika gave a full explanation about the newcomers, answering the students' many questions until most of them seemed to understand. Shikamaru wondered aloud how Sasuke could be unmoved by Sakura. Naruto mentally scolded Shikamaru for prying into personal feelings. Hiba, equally baffled, questioned how Sasuke ended up with someone like Sakura. Naruto mentally forced the classmates to quiet down. Kyohime, standing nearby, radiated a tense, protective energy. She made it clear that she was deeply hurt and demanded to know whether anyone was suggesting her partner's feelings were anything but sincere. The classroom held its breath as the confrontation threatened to escalate. Mordred snapped at the rowdy students in a dangerous voice, scaring them into silence. She ordered anyone who kept talking to sit down and warned she would remove troublemakers if they did not comply. The students quieted and took their seats. Irika thanked Mordred for restoring order. He had been annoyed by the constant chatter and needed the class to listen. Irika then explained that everyone would be divided into teams of 3. He assigned Naruto to a group with Sasuke and Sakura. Naruto felt conflicted about being with them, especially Sakura, whom he did not like, but he still found himself in the same group. The students waited on the school rooftop for the teacher to arrive. Naruto sat among Kyoheim, Artoria, Mordred, and Leonidas. Mordred asked where the teacher was, and Artoria urged her to stay calm while Leonidas remarked that the teacher should have arrived earlier. Naruto complained that it was a waste of time, and then movement drew their attention as the teacher approached. Kakashi arrived, his white spiky hair and eye patch over the left eye making him easy to spot. He glanced toward Sasuke and Sakura and then toward the four figures who had come with Naruto, recognizing them as summoned allies. Kakashi thought the rumors about Naruto's summoning ability and its connection to the incident involving Mizuki were likely true and shook his head. Kakashi then checked whether anyone else was present. The students nodded. He introduced himself as Kakashi Hatake and announced he would be their teacher. He explained the task ahead and instructed the students to pay close attention. Mordred privately judged Kakashi to be an interesting character. Artoria considered that he might be trustworthy. Naruto also found the teacher impressive and turned to watch him as he spoke. Kakashi asked each student for their name and what they wished to achieve, waiting for their answers. Sakura blushed and began to speak about herself and her distrust of Naruto, which drew annoyed groans from Naruto and the summoned allies. Naruto noted silently that the feeling appeared to be mutual. Sakura swung at Naruto, but Mordred intercepted the punch, stopped Sakura's fist, and struck her on the head, knocking her to the ground. Kakashi then called out to Sasuke as an emo boy. Sasuke introduced himself as Sasuke Uchiha and declared that his goal was to kill the man he resented. Several servants laughed and mocked the ambition, with Siyu thinking the goal was pathetic, Billy wondering what hardship had made Sasuke so tough, Ingra erupting with boisterous laughter, and Iskandar noting that Sasuke was not doing well. Their ridicule filled the area. Kakashi turned his attention to Naruto and asked for his name and dream. Naruto introduced himself as Naruto Uzumaki and said his dream was not simply to become Hokage but to be a hero. He also admitted he liked ramen and made it clear he did not care what the others thought. Kakashi found Naruto a little impressive. Kakashi informed the three of them that the test would take place the next morning. Mordred asked their master whether he wanted them to attend the test and face the challenge. Naruto confirmed that they would follow the rules and play along, though he suspected the man was hiding something. Naruto noted he had skipped breakfast but would still participate. Artoria asked what he intended to do the next day. Naruto answered that he would do his best to find out what the man was up to. The next morning, Naruto arrived on time, having already eaten. He paid little mind to whatever Kakashi had planned and moved forward, feeling the villagers' glares. Leonidas and Mordred flanked Naruto, protecting him and silencing the villagers with stern looks. The three of them reached the place where Kakashi waited. Naruto told Leonidas and Mordred they could leave and said he would consider what the man might be doing. They nodded and withdrew into their astral forms. Naruto stood between Mizuki and Irika, furious and protective. He accused Mizuki of being scum and ordered him not to harm Irika-sensei. Naruto braced himself, preparing to release a powerful force when Mizuki lunged and swung a weapon at him. Before the attack could land, a sudden, precise slash cut through the air nearby, tearing through the scene with anime-like intensity and throwing Mizuki off balance. Mizuki was sent flying and crashed to the ground. A newcomer stood where the strike had come from, a lone figure in knight-like armor. She had tied-back blonde hair and gauntlet arms that gleamed in the light. She stepped forward and confronted Mizuki, calling him a demon and demanding to know why he would try to kill the boy without reason. Irika started to speak in surprise. Mizuki stared, stunned at the unexpected arrival. The knight then turned toward Naruto, who was kneeling and wide-eyed. She asked him, in a serious tone, whether he was her master. Naruto felt flustered and quietly awed by her presence. He could not speak for a moment. The moment held a gentle, emotional charge rather than anything overt. To be continued. Naruto perched on a tree branch, watching Kakashi spar with Sasuke and Sakura below. From his vantage point he realized Sasuke and Sakura were cooperating, and Kakashi, sharp and composed, seemed a step ahead of them. As Naruto considered how to intervene with a harmless prank, he sensed someone else beside him. A golden presence manifested, Caster Gilgamesh. Gilgamesh asked what Naruto intended to do about the masked Jonin. Naruto decided on a prank to unsettle Kakashi and produced a card with a small trick that vanished as it was shown. The plan was set and the mischief began. Down below, Kakashi called out loudly for Naruto to reveal himself. The shout went unanswered and brought a tense silence. Before Kakashi could speak again, he felt danger behind him and moved just in time to avoid an incoming strike. His landing created a burst of force that rippled across the ground. From beyond the field of view, a massive figure rose, towering like a mountain. The demigod Hercules stood over 13 feet tall, with gray skin, long black hair, and a great sword in hand. He exuded a dangerous aura. Kakashi registered the threat and braced himself. Hercules let out a thunderous roar and charged with overwhelming power. Kakashi dodged and maneuvered to survive, using tactics and throwables to create distance. He hurled an explosive device that detonated and obscured the demigod in smoke. Hercules emerged from the blast unshaken and struck back with tremendous force. The impact left Kakashi wounded and reeling, forced to leap and counter, but Hercules caught him and slammed him to the ground, then pressed the attack with relentless blows in a frantic, fierce exchange. The fight raged on, brutal in intensity but presented as rapid, stylized anime action rather than graphic harm. Hercules kicked Kakashi, sending the ninja into a tree. Kakashi struggled to his feet, gritting his teeth in anger as he assessed the massive opponent. Kakashi muttered that the thing was tough and wondered what it could be. He resolved to keep fighting the towering figure, but when he turned his attention back, he saw Hercules raising a great arm to strike. Kakashi moved to counter, only to be met with a crushing backhand that knocked him to the ground again. As Kakashi looked up, Hercules raised his sword and brought it down. Kakashi used a jutsu to create a wooden doll decoy and vanished. Hercules, growling in frustration, sliced the decoy apart as if it meant nothing, then readied himself to continue the hunt. Kakashi admitted to himself that none of his attacks were landing and that this opponent felt almost unbeatable. He wondered what kind of creature Naruto had summoned to pursue him. At that moment Naruto revealed himself, appearing on Hercules' shoulder. Kakashi plotted to capture Naruto and thought about a new tactical plan. Naruto noted that the giant would likely go easy and that he did not intend to kill their target. Sensing an incoming threat, Hercules raised his left arm and blocked a volley of kunai knives aimed at him. Kakashi swore in disbelief that Hercules could block the knives, tearing at his own hair as he tried to devise a new plan. Naruto observed Kakashi standing behind a tree and pointed him out. Hercules set Naruto down and charged, aiming for the visible target, but the figure he struck turned out to be another decoy. Kakashi used clones and decoys to confuse them, keeping his true position hidden. Naruto, recognizing the deception, called for Mordred to join them. Mordred appeared beside Naruto and prepared to deal with the decoys. Hercules advanced to search for the real ninja but stepped into a trap. A pack of dogs leapt from hiding and swarmed him, attempting to bring him down. Hercules shook them off with powerful blows and knocked the animals aside, sending several tumbling into the trees. He overpowered one and tossed the others away, leaving them stunned rather than harmed. Naruto reacted in surprise, and Mordred dashed toward the apparent culprit, driving her blade into what she thought was the enemy. It proved to be another fake. Mordred realized they had been fooled and turned to see Kakashi positioned behind Naruto, preparing to grab him. Mordred shouted that she had found him and charged. She drew her sword and struck at the fake, then closed on the real Kakashi. He dodged with a backflip, but Mordred closed the distance with a burst of speed and landed a powerful punch that sent Kakashi crashing through a stand of trees, knocking several down. Kakashi cursed in pain and tried to gather himself, looking up for Mordred. She attacked from behind, striking him again. Kakashi managed a kick, but it struck her helmet and left him reeling. He staggered back, clutching his injured leg. Mordred told him that her armor was stronger than he could imagine and that she would not kill him but intended to thoroughly defeat him. She moved in and began to beat him back with a relentless barrage of strikes, keeping him on the defensive. The test ended with a distant ringing. Kakashi lay knocked to the ground, his face bruised and his body battered, barely conscious and looking as if he had been through a brutal fight. Naruto reminded Mordred that she had said she would not kill him. Mordred replied that she had not meant to, but she acknowledged Kakashi's condition and asked what they should do next. Naruto decided to bring the other two over and set them down beneath a tree, then said he needed to train and asked for someone to heal the teacher. At that moment, the servant Nightingale appeared. Nightingale introduced herself as a servant ready to assist. Naruto explained that Kakashi had been badly beaten and needed healing, and that Naruto was going to train with the servants to grow stronger and faster. The nursery girl who tended to Kakashi examined him, saw the bruises and slashes, and began to apply her medical skill to stabilize him. Some time later, Naruto lay on the ground, breathing hard from a strenuous workout. The servants had been training him relentlessly to improve his strength and speed. He tried to get up, and Leonidas stepped in to help him to his feet, praising him for his effort. Naruto thanked Leonidas. Leonidas offered to escort him back to his lodgings, and Naruto smiled as the other servants helped bring their young master home safely. Kakashi stirred and slowly rose, exhausted from the encounter. He had been overwhelmed by Hercules during the conflict and was trying to piece together where he was. He saw Hercules standing nearby with Nightingale. Kakashi noticed that Nightingale seemed a little flustered, but composed. Hercules made a low growl, and Nightingale assured him that everything had been taken care of. Kakashi asked who they were and what had happened. Nightingale explained that she had been the one to help him, that Hercules had tried to go easy but the fight had left him badly injured, and that he needed to be careful. Kakashi insisted he knew what he was doing. Nightingale added that Kakashi's two students were safe, that their master was at home, and that if Kakashi wished to speak with him it would have to wait until the following morning. Then Nightingale and Hercules vanished in a soft golden dust, leaving Kakashi to reflect on how formidable the servants truly were, though he did not yet understand how much stronger they might become. Sasuke woke up and, seeing Kakashi standing with bandages, asked what had happened. Kakashi told Sasuke that he had something for him and passed a scroll-like item to the young man. Sasuke accepted it with a grim smirk, steeling himself to confront the man who had torn his past apart. He left on his own. Sakura rose slowly, shaken and wondering aloud what had just transpired. Kakashi watched them go and wondered what to do about this capable but dangerous young man and his powerful servants. Time passed. Elsewhere, Danzo sat in his room, studying reports about the boy with the fox power. He had learned that the boy seemed to possess an ability to summon allies or outsiders who fought for and protected him. Danzo resolved that he needed to find the boy and seize that power for himself. He grew impatient because his men had not returned. Suddenly an explosion rocked the compound. Danzo rushed outside and discovered a devastating scene. Many of his operatives lay incapacitated among the wreckage as if a powerful blast had struck them. Survivors scrambled, and an ominous, mocking laugh carried on the wind. Danzo demanded to know who was out there and ordered those around him to reveal themselves. He shouted that they would pay for what they had done to his men. A feminine voice answered playfully, and then she revealed herself, hovering in the sky in a classic military uniform and hat. Her name was Oda Nobunaga. Observers noticed flintlock guns and pistols arrayed around her, nearly 200 in all, and that she carried a bow as well, marking her as an archer. Oda laughed and mocked the ninjas, calling their numbers pathetic. She proclaimed that they faced the sixth heaven and declared herself Oda Nobunaga, the Demon King. Adam replied by ordering his ninjas to open fire. Bullets and flintlock shots filled the air as they fired. She stood unflinching, looking down with a cruel smile and taunting the mortals before preparing to demonstrate her power. Then she activated her noble phantasm, unleashing a sweeping, overwhelming assault across Danzo's base and hideout that struck like a dramatic, impossible storm and caught the defenders unaware. Hercules kicked Kakashi, sending the ninja into a tree. Kakashi hit the ground and slowly pushed himself up, teeth clenched in anger. He thought to himself that his opponent was unusually tough and wondered what he could be. Hercules then slammed Kakashi into the ground with tremendous force and continued his assault, pummeling him with overwhelming power. The battle erupted into chaos as Oda Nobunaga unleashed her noble phantasm. A sweeping, devastating barrage of energy and fire swept across the area, striking the assassins who had come to attack. The force of her attack was far greater than anyone had expected. Many of the ninja assailants were incapacitated or driven back by its impact. Danzo watched in stunned disbelief as the fires and the fallen attackers filled the battlefield. He registered the sound of Oda's laugh and found himself taken aback by her confidence. He accused her of being a demon and vowed to stop her. Oda responded with a defiant challenge, standing her ground. Danzo charged and attempted to use a powerful jutsu, but Oda intercepted the attack with a precise sword technique that neutralized his assault. She followed with controlled, sweeping gunfire that pushed him back. Enraged, Danzo summoned a monstrous construct with his command seal and sent it forward. Oda, calm and focused, used her guns and commanding power to dismantle the summoned creature and then unleashed another overwhelming noble phantasm that struck Danzo directly. The attack left him defeated on the field. His forces collapsed in the wake of her power. The scale of Oda's response left many watching in stunned silence. It had been overwhelming. Time skipped forward. At the Hokage's office, the elder man sat among his paperwork, trying to make sense of the recent events and the unexpected companions surrounding Naruto. He noticed the strangers were extremely powerful. Nearby lay Mizuki, clearly downed in the battle. The blonde-haired woman who had defended the place identified herself as Saber. Before the Hokage could ponder further, a nervous messenger burst into the room and reported that Danzo had been killed. The Hokage absorbed the news with visible surprise and immediately demanded more information. The next morning, the Hokage asked Naruto when the attack had occurred. Naruto sighed and said it was a long story. Beside him stood a small group of allies: Oda and Nobunaga, Jack the Ripper, Mordred, Leonidas, Amiya, and Siyu, who remained watchful and close by his side. Naruto explained that Danzo had tried to have him captured during the night because of the power he possessed. Leonidas added that the attempt had taken place under cover of darkness and that Danzo's men had boldly tried to take them by surprise. The Hokage listened, growing angrier by the possibility that someone had tried to seize the teacher's student. In a flashback, a team of Danzo's ninjas Fu, Kinato, and Toryun moved stealthily toward Naruto's location with orders to capture him alive. They approached the door and began to set a charge when the door burst open and a hail of gunfire met them. Projectiles cut through the doorway, incapacitating several of Danzo's assailants and scattering the rest. The scene returned to the present, where the Hokage and his allies prepared to piece together the full scope of Danzo's scheme and the consequences that followed. Kinato shouted in disbelief at the sudden turn of events. Toryun warned the others to watch out and led the three ninjas to dodge. He and Kinato landed on the rooftop of the neighboring building. Fu asked where the others were and whether anyone had been seen. Kinato admitted that it was too dark to see anything. A mocking, feminine laugh then rang out as a voice introduced herself arrogantly as Oda Nobunaga. Oda announced that they would face the Devil King of the Sixth Heaven and immediately opened fire, her guns sending powerful blasts that knocked several attackers back and set off an explosion on the ground. Toryun swore at the apparent madness of her assault. Kinato tried to use a mind transfer technique, channeling his power with his hands, but Oda laughed off the attempt as insignificant. Without warning, Mordred appeared behind them. She struck and kicked Kinato so hard that his body went over the edge and fell from the roof. Mordred then focused on Toryun, calling him a crude name as she swung her Clarence sword. Toryun dodged and landed on the ground, unleashing his own technique with everything he had. He fired an attack, but Mordred met it with a sword slash that effortlessly cut through the assault, leaving Toryun stunned. Mordred taunted him for such weak techniques. Toryun drew a kunai to defend himself, but the kunai shattered on contact and Mordred struck him, sending him crashing to the ground. He collapsed and did not move again. Mordred scoffed at the notion that a small weapon could defeat her. She scanned the area, saw the remaining ninjas still armed, and charged ahead, quickly and efficiently neutralizing the rest without mercy. Fu thought to himself in disbelief at what these two fighters were made of, realizing that his attacks could not hurt them and deciding he had to retreat. Oda accused them of daring to invade her master's home and vowed that they would pay for the intrusion. She unleashed more attacks toward Fu and the fleeing ninjas, and Fu used his technique to escape into a narrow alley. As the other attackers tried to flee, Siyu and Emiya appeared with weapons drawn. Siyu said they could not let the intruders leave until they were dealt with, and then the two fighters moved to confront the escaping group. They quickly overpowered the remaining ninjas and left them incapacitated. Fu managed to get further into the alleyway, but a shield slammed into his back, pinning him against the wall and causing him to cry out in pain. Leonidas then struck him with a spear, pinning him and demanding to know who had sent him. Fu initially refused, but when Leonidas threatened further force, he broke and named Danzo Shimura as the one who sent him. Leonidas demanded to know Danzo's whereabouts. After Fu gave the information, Leonidas used his shield to bash Fu, leaving him unconscious on the ground. Siyu remarked that the rest of the attackers were taken care of, and Leonidas nodded in agreement. Oda, having confirmed the lead on Danzo's hideout, took to the air to pursue it, intent on destroying the place. The flashback ended. The Hokage sighed and reflected that Danzo had gotten what was coming to him, but reminded everyone that killing was not the answer. Emiya reacted angrily, pointing out that the young master had been betrayed and backstabbed, insisting that those who had tried to kill him had dishonored themselves. Leonidas asked the Hokage whether the villagers had been allowed to turn on the boy for harming the people they loved, questioning the leader's control over his people. The Hokage reacted with shock at the accusation, and Siyu explained that they had read the mind of the person in question. A man with red eyes confronted the old man, reminding him of the boy's past and the beatings he had suffered at the hands of the villagers, and asked whether it was wise to let the child remain among people who had called him a demon. Kakashi moved to intervene, but Siyu stepped forward, drawing his spear and stopping Kakashi with a swift motion that revealed the servant's surprising speed. Siyu warned Kakashi not to use any techniques or weapons and made it clear he would act if the boy was threatened. The old man sighed and promised to consider the situation. He assured them that he would take measures to protect the boy and that anyone who attacked him would be held responsible. He then released the servants, acknowledging that they had every right to defend their master. Oda added a blunt warning that there would be severe consequences if the villagers did not listen, and the old man nodded in agreement. Afterward, the old man informed Naruto that he had a mission for him and Team 7. They were to defend the bridge of the Hidden Leaf. The next morning, Naruto woke with a yawn, stretching both arms as he tried to shake off his fatigue. He noticed the servants pressing the old man to keep the villagers in check. They were adamant that no one should harm their young master and that anyone who caused trouble would face swift retribution. Their determination made it clear they would not allow harm to come to Naruto. Preparing to move out, Naruto told Nero to hold on. Nero, cheerful and eager, hugged him and rested her head briefly against his shoulder. She had short blonde hair and wore a striking red outfit. Naruto asked her to slow down, and she giggled, explaining that she was simply excited by the beauty of the place and curious about how large it might be. The servants had been training Naruto to be stronger and faster, and they read the books he had collected so they could better understand the world they lived in. Kakashi called out to the group, drawing their attention. Naruto, Sasuke, and Sakura approached, and Kakashi noted with surprise the number of servants accompanying Naruto. Sakura was taken aback by Nero's striking appearance, while Sasuke remained cool and aloof. When Naruto asked whom they were defending, Kakashi introduced Tazuna, a middle-aged bridge builder with white hair and a short beard, carrying a worn backpack. Tazuna explained his role and then expressed incredulity at the rumors he had heard. He asked if the boy before him was truly the same one said to have defeated ninjas alongside allies. His skepticism rubbed some of the servants the wrong way. The servants bristled at the disrespect shown to their master. Nero and the others felt a fierce loyalty and were ready to respond if the situation escalated, each imagining ways to teach the man a harsh lesson. Naruto sensed their rising agitation and urged them to calm down, reminding them that the man was a client and that they had come to help. Their anger faded into attentive silence as they focused on the task ahead. The others had no idea what Naruto was thinking, but Nero hugged him briefly and asked Preetor to tell them, which snapped Naruto out of his daydream and brought him back to the present. Tazuna checked on him, asking if he was all right. Naruto replied that he was fine but explained that the voices had spoken about Tazuna and were hostile toward anyone who tried to insult him. Tazuna reacted in surprise, and Sasuke and Sakura chuckled quietly at the exchange. Kakashi then urged them to move on, and the three of them went off to explore another part of the world as their journey continued. Some time later, elsewhere, the five of them walked together toward the old man who was building a bridge alone. Nero remained close to Naruto as they continued their long walk. Sakura, unsettled by her own insecurities and by Nero's confident presence, felt a twinge of jealousy and considered confronting her, but she held back. Suddenly a projectile flew toward Sakura. Nero moved into view and used her red sword to block the arrow before it could strike. Tazuna, Sasuke, and Kakashi all reacted in surprise. Nero announced that they had company, and the group turned to see a number of ninjas approaching, accompanied by the demon brothers armed and ready. Naruto told Nero to protect the old man. Kakashi directed Sasuke to stay with him, and the two readied themselves for combat. Naruto then summoned three servants, the assassin Amiya, Okita Tsuji, and Saito Hai. Amiya acknowledged the call with quiet focus, Okita readied her weapon, and Saito stepped forward, observing that they were about to fight their foes. Naruto expressed his determination to defeat the attackers, and the samurai and assassin moved to engage. The ninjas charged, and the three summoned warriors met them head-on. Saito and Okita fought with swift, precise strikes that disabled the attackers without graphic harm, their blades moving with disciplined efficiency. Amiya moved with lethal precision to subdue the remaining assailants, and one by one the attackers were overwhelmed and driven back. A short, tense pause followed as the group assessed the scene and prepared for whatever might come next. Amiya, the assassin, opened fire with his submachine gun, cutting through the attackers with practiced efficiency. When enemies closed in, he drew a combat knife and disabled them with swift, precise movements. Switching seamlessly to a handgun, he began to dual-wield, taking down wave after wave with cold calm. The demon brothers Gozu and Meizu charged next, using coordinated tactics to overwhelm him. Amiya blocked their blows and countered, moving with measured brutality. Meizu lunged but was met by a gunshot from Amiya. Meizu collapsed, motionless. Gozu cried out in disbelief and fury, then rushed forward. Amiya answered with a flurry of strikes that left Gozu defeated and falling to the ground. Amiya, breathing heavily, called for surrender. Okita and Saito finished clearing the remaining ninjas nearby. Naruto, Sakura, Kakashi, Sasuke, and Tazuna approached the scene. Naruto demanded to know who had sent the attackers. The group then continued their journey by boat. Along the way, they learned more about Tazuna and the threat he feared, the gangster Gatu, who extorted and brutalized villagers who could not pay. On the boat, Naruto sat apart, watching the others. Nero grew impatient with Sakura's vain chatter about her appearance, and Sakura soon shifted into a distant, focused state, her servants remaining close to protect their master from any hidden danger. Sasuke observed how effortlessly the servants had dealt with the ninjas and thought that their power was notable. Tazuna privately regretted having insulted Naruto earlier. Kakashi, unsettled, reflected on the servants' speed and capabilities, especially the demon brothers' unusual abilities. Sakura felt irritated by Naruto's tendency to act independently with his summoned servants and bristled at his apparent strength. Sasuke brooded on his own desire for power and revenge for his family, a dark determination that went unnoticed by Naruto. The servants heard Sasuke's thoughts and grew uneasy. Midea warned that their master's friend appeared to be changing in worrying ways. Leonidas worried that Sasuke might be after the deck and its power. Siyu dismissed the notion that the boy would understand why one would covet their master's power. Artoria warned that anyone who tried to harm or betray their master would regret it. Gilgamesh found the situation intriguing and warned that if anyone dared to misuse their master, he would unleash his own formidable arsenal. The other servants agreed that they would be prepared for whatever conflict might come. Later, the boat reached shore. Kakashi signaled that they had arrived, and Team 7 disembarked to continue on foot. They soon realized they were being followed. An unseen presence moved through the trees. Time passed, and as they walked into the forest, Naruto grew uneasy, sensing someone shadowing them. The servants confirmed the presence of another nearby, and Artoria informed Naruto that they had company. Naruto told Kakashi that he felt they were being tailed, prompting the team to halt and prepare for whatever might emerge from the shadows. A lone figure stepped from the bushes in the forest, causing one of them to stumble to the ground. Team 7 froze in surprise at the sudden appearance of a new intruder. Zabuza noted to himself that the boy had sensed his presence and allowed himself a small, satisfied thought. Kakashi identified the man as Zabuza. Sasuke asked Kakashi if he knew him. Kakashi admitted he did not know the man personally, but recognized him as a wanted criminal. Sakura asked what they should do. Kakashi looked at his team and ordered them to protect the old man and make sure no one else approached him. Kakashi then turned to face Zabuza and prepared to confront him alone, fully aware of the danger. Kakashi felt a surge of confusion and called out, wondering what was happening. A towering figure in self-formed armor, 8 feet tall and holding a spear in its right hand, drew his attention. The figure introduced himself as Mori Nagayoshi. Kakashi asked if Mori had come from the deck. Mori identified himself as Berserker and announced that he would deal with the intruder. Mori advanced toward Zabuza, who rose to face him. Zabuza asked who the newcomer was. Mori hesitated briefly, then sprinted forward. Zabuza responded by using hand seals to summon a serpent-like dragon. Mori met the technique head-on, slashing at the manifested attack with his spear and dispersing it. Zabuza was shocked that a physical strike could interrupt his technique and registered how fast Mori was moving. Mori closed the distance and attempted to stab Zabuza. The assassin dodged and ducked beneath the spear, but Mori's persistence forced Zabuza to fight hard to stay on his feet. Mori landed a heavy blow to Zabuza's chest, sending him into a tree. He then charged, driving Zabuza through a stand of trees and to the ground, lifting him up by the collar. Zabuza swung his sword, but the blade shattered against Mori's armored hand in a burst of sparks. Zabuza, surprised, planted a small explosive device and used the distraction to slip away. He ran quickly, wondering who Mori was, what the armor was made of, and why the stranger had not used any techniques. Before he could gain distance, a fireball struck him and knocked him down. Jalter revealed herself and greeted him with a taunting remark about leaving so soon. Zabuza demanded to know who she was and whether she was working with the newcomer. Jalter confirmed their alliance and warned him she would use her flames against him. She then unleashed a controlled wave of fire that overwhelmed his position and forced him into retreat. The two had clearly made Zabuza's mission a failure that day. Elsewhere, 3 figures met in an office to discuss funds. They argued over payments promised to Zabuza and his assistant, noting the money was still insufficient. Suddenly the office door burst open and a badly injured Zabuza stumbled in. One of the women rushed forward to assist him, calling his name with concern as she helped him to his feet. A bewildered client demanded to know what had happened. Zabuza explained that a powerful enemy had ambushed him. Back with Naruto, he and his companions hurried toward the town. Mori and Jalter accompanied them for a time. Jalter offered Naruto a brief, comforting hug to steady him. Sakura wondered why Naruto had someone with him. They reached the town in time and saw the bridge that needed defending and the house where Tazuna lived. Inside, they took seats and listened as Tazuna explained the plan to protect the bridge. Jalter remained to keep watch over Naruto, while Mori departed in his astral form. Tazuna handed Naruto a cup of yogurt. A little girl named Jackie climbed into Naruto's lap and asked for some. Naruto obliged, feeding the child as they all settled in and tried to enjoy a quiet moment. A boy came down the stairs and noticed the newcomers, including the strangers who had arrived with them. Naruto noticed the boy looked pitiful but could also see sorrow mixed with anger on his face, an expression that made Naruto feel he needed to act quickly. The boy seemed to be blaming those who had been unable to save his father. Inari shouted that no one could be saved. Naruto sighed and asked what he had said. Jackie moved off Naruto's lap and stood nearby, noticing that the boy was about her age. Inari repeated that no one could do anything and could not be saved. Jackie asked their guardian if she could tear the boy apart in anger. Naruto refused, reminding her that they did not kill innocents, only true wrongdoers. Jackie nodded and accepted his answer. Naruto then suggested a plan he thought might help Inari, implying there was something that could be done about Gatu. The others reacted with surprise. Inari stammered, confused, and was about to ask the boy what he needed when another figure appeared, a woman of striking presence, carrying a staff and wearing a crown. Morgan Le Fay. Morgan asked Inari if he remembered his father. He fell silent for a few moments before answering that he did not understand why she was asking. Morgan extended her hand, and when he took it she invited him to come and talk. She led him away and reassured Naruto that she would not harm the boy. Jackie returned to Naruto's lap to spend time with her mother. Sakura felt a pang of jealousy at how Naruto seemed to have helpful and confident allies around him. Jalter noticed Sakura's expression and smirked, teasing that Sakura was jealous. Sakura tried to protest, insisting on her own qualities. Jalter only teased that maybe Sakura lacked confidence, leaving the pink-haired girl flustered. A brief pause followed as everyone settled, the group preparing for whatever came next. Naruto believed Kakashi would be strong enough to defeat their opponent. Amiya, the assassin, told Naruto that his teacher was not strong enough and asked what he intended to do, forcing the spiky-haired blonde to think quickly. Naruto drew another card, Berserker, absorbed its power, and used his chakra to summon a new servant. Zabuza prepared to finish Kakashi and raised his weapon, but his danger instinct warned him of a new threat. He leapt to evade the strike, only to be unexpectedly kicked in the chest and sent crashing to the ground, knocked down. After Morgan showed him the way and taught him what he needed to know, he understood. Time passed. Back to Haku. Two henchmen were running ahead toward Tazuna's house with orders to capture the family. Haku arrived on her own, arriving just in time to warn them. Haku warned the two henchmen to be careful, and the men acknowledged her and moved forward. One of the henchmen told Haku that the task would be easy and they were going in, and the other agreed. The men kicked the door open. Haku heard shouts, the sounds of a struggle, and terrified cries from inside. Startled, she moved closer and a sudden impact nearby made her recoil. She sensed danger and leaped away as something metallic struck the ground. Haku turned and saw a small figure brandishing daggers. Jack announced that this time they would be killed on the spot. Haku realized at once that the girl was not ordinary, she was small but unervingly fierce. When the girl charged, Haku relied on her survival instincts and prepared to defend herself. The girl moved with frightening speed, reacting to Haku's presence as if she smelled an opponent. Jack insisted on playing and crouched with her knives ready. Haku cursed under her breath and braced for the encounter. Back to Zabuza. Zabuza had recovered and regenerated, determined to get his revenge. He had lost his right arm and had plans to replace it. Driven by his purpose, he ran toward the bridge and arrived as quickly as he could. He announced his return and noticed Naruto standing with his hands in his jacket pockets, while Tazuna and others continued working on the bridge. Kakashi had allowed Naruto to handle the situation. Naruto greeted Zabuza but told him there was no need for him to fight today. Zabuza demanded to know where the boy and the woman were, insisting that he wanted payback. Zabuza argued that the bridge should be taken down immediately. He laughed quietly as tension mounted around him and glanced at the spreading mist. Naruto warned Zabuza that he was not alone in mist-based power and hinted that someone else would make things difficult for him. Then the ground behind Zabuza erupted, and a dark aura swirled into view, a black mist coalescing into a towering armored figure with a visor that glowed red. The newcomer revealed himself as a massive armored warrior. Kakashi reacted with surprise. Sasuke asked why his hands were trembling, and Sakura felt a spike of terror she had never known before. Tazuna broke into a cold sweat at the sight. Zabuza demanded to know what the armored being was. The armored warrior roared and charged. It struck with overwhelming force, hammering at Zabuza with relentless, crushing blows. Zabuza fought to survive against the monstrous knight, blocking and countering where he could as the armored figure battered him. Naruto watched with a small, determined smile, recognizing the battle against those he considered enemies of the village. Kakashi wondered what he had gotten himself into as the clash escalated. Previously in Naruto's deck of heroes, Kakashi reacted in surprise and called the man crazy. Naruto stood with Kakashi, Sasuke, Sakura, and Tazuna while the others continued building the bridge, Naruto, however, watched the battle between Zabuza and Lancelot, the berserker servant. Lancelot was overwhelming Zabuza with relentless force. Naruto realized this servant was not only exceptionally strong but also fueled by ruthless rage. Zabuza was driven to the ground, coughing and unable to rise. Lancelot's onslaught battered him until he could no longer stand. Lancelot lifted Zabuza and, with a final overwhelming strike, left him shattered and motionless. Kakashi watched in stunned shock. Sasuke stared in disbelief. Sakura gasped in horror as the enemy fell by Lancelot's hand. Naruto looked down at Zabuza's still form, then turned his attention to a new movement approaching. Several thugs stepped forward, weapons in hand, and among them stood a small man Naruto immediately recognized as Gato, the killer of Inari's father. Naruto acknowledged Gato and signaled to Lancelot, Hercules, and Mori. He ordered his servants to neutralize the attackers. The three servants moved forward and swiftly took down the thugs with precise, brutal efficiency. Kakashi watched as they cut through the attackers with ease and found himself wondering what kind of power Naruto possessed and how strong those servants truly were. Sometime later, the focus shifted to Haku. She had already suffered many injuries from the small assassin servant Jack, who had pressed the attack without hesitation. Jack stood ready in her fighting stance and prepared to unleash her noble phantasm. Jack announced that it was time to play. Haku, breathing heavily and reeling from the blows, thought Jack was like a demon and braced for what would come next. A noble phantasm struck across the battlefield. Haku fell, apparently slain by Jack, and Jack watched with a sick satisfaction at the outcome. Inari and his mother stood at the edge of the fight, horrified at what they had witnessed. Inari stammered that she had killed her, and Tsunami reacted in shocked disbelief for the sake of her Kami. Morgan stepped forward and scolded them that they should not have seen such a scene, appearing suddenly where they had been watching. Morgan warned that her husband's wrath was close at hand and implied that what followed was part of that vengeance. She then sensed more attackers arriving. Jalter emerged by herself, bearing a spear wreathed in flames and a grim, determined expression. Morgan told Inari and his mother to stay inside the house and not to come out. Jalter charged, her spear blazing, and in swift, fierce actions she overwhelmed the new wave of thugs, scattering and incapacitating them without lingering on blood or gore. Farther away, Naruto, Sasuke, Sakura, and Kakashi watched with growing horror at the scene. The attackers had been routed, many of them felled and unmoving about the area. Gato stood on the field, pale with terror, unaccustomed to seeing such overwhelming force applied so ruthlessly. Mori moved through the ranks, dispatching several attackers with precision and sending the rest fleeing toward the sea. Lancelot cut through their defenses with swift, decisive sword work that brought them to a halt. Hercules used raw strength to subdue anyone who resisted. Only Gato remained in the center, trembling and stunned at how easily the newcomers had taken down his men. Gato marveled inwardly that these newcomers had taken them out so effortlessly and wondered who they were and how such power had appeared. Realizing his defeat, he surrendered, begging not to be killed. Naruto stepped forward and identified Gato by name. Gato offered money and pleaded for his life, but Naruto reacted with cold resolve. He would not be bought, and Gato would have to answer for the terror he had inflicted on the village. Naruto declared that the reign of terror had to end then and there. Ashiwakamaru appeared, composed and ready, acknowledging Naruto's command. Kakashi rushed forward in an attempt to stop Naruto from going too far, but Mori intercepted Kakashi and blocked his path, preventing him from intervening. With resistance cut off, Ashiwakamaru advanced and delivered a single, decisive strike that ended Gato's threat in a swift, final manner. After Gato was taken down, Kakashi, Sasuke, and Sakura stood frozen, shocked by the aftermath. Ashiwakamaru sheathed her sword calmly. Naruto secured a piece of evidence, nodded to the four servants, and thanked them for their help, then asked them to clean up the scene. Ashiwakamaru reassured Naruto that they would take care of the bodies. Naruto smiled faintly and expressed his gratitude to the servants, though Team 7 still wore haunted expressions. Naruto then approached Kakashi, Sasuke, and Sakura and indicated that they should move on. They agreed to help the old man and finish the mission together. Some time later, Team 7 and the servants had defeated Gato, his thugs, and the two assassins. Naruto produced proof that Gato was dead, and Inari was stunned and unable to believe that the man who had murdered his father was gone. Vengeance had been served. The group began to bring matters to a close. Back in the village, Kakashi sat with the Hokage to discuss Naruto and the servants, and how they had handled the enemies. Kakashi raised the issue of Naruto's cold efficiency and the ruthless methods of the servants, concerned by how easily they had dispatched their foes. The Hokage advised restraint and explained that sometimes the world demanded harsh measures. It was not always heroes who were needed, but monsters shaped to meet corruption. Kakashi objected, worried about the moral cost, and said he was leaving. The Hokage sighed as Kakashi departed, then signaled for someone to come forth. A tall, dark figure stepped from the shadows, clad in black armor with a horned helmet and a skull-like visage. A chilling blue aura surrounded him, and he stood like an immense guardian, sword in hand. He introduced himself as King Hassan, the Angel of Death. King Hassan told the Hokage that the outcome of the operation had not gone as planned. The Hokage agreed that the world was corrupt and in need of a lesson. King Hassan added that the world must learn fear and be made to obey. The Hokage confirmed that the plan would move forward and then asked why King Hassan had come. King Hassan said he had come to speak about Sasuke Uchiha. The Hokage answered that Sasuke was the last member of the Uchiha clan and then explained the boy's tragic past and the burdens he carried. The two men considered what that meant for the future and how they would watch over the boy as events unfolded. To be continued. We started from below through the ashes down from the dirt, running from the cold, drawn to fire, loving when it burned. When it all came down to destiny, only he could bend the rules and walk that road through the ashes down from the dirt. Voices called out as the skies fell and heroes answered, refusing to be held down. They burned through the night from darkness into the light and rose all the way to the top as the heroes called. After his training, Naruto was drenched in sweat. His hair and clothes clung to him, and he felt the physical toll of the effort. As he steadied his breathing, he felt stronger, faster, and more capable than before. He understood that the lessons his servants had taught the young boy were not mere drills but survival skills for facing enemies in the wider world. Hippolyta approached and praised him, telling him he had done well. She was a Greek servant with short brown hair and dressed in traditional garb. She told him he had grown much stronger. Naruto breathed and acknowledged that he definitely felt stronger and faster, that training made him better, and that he needed to be prepared. Hippolyta smiled and confirmed this. Morgan appeared and lifted him into her arms, carrying him tenderly. She observed how tired he was from the intense training and remarked that the young master had trained well. Morgan told Hippolyta that she would take care of him and that they should leave for now. Hippolyta agreed, though she noted that newcomers might be hiding nearby. The servants sensed the presence of potential threats and departed while remaining vigilant. Elsewhere, an unnamed antagonist reflected that the rumors were true. Naruto had powerful allies and was not to be underestimated. He wondered who these allies were and what their weaknesses might be. To be continued. 5 months later, Naruto had grown into a 17-year-old with visible muscle and a commanding presence. He carried an array of weapons, swords, firearms, and spears and had become the village's most formidable defender alongside his powerful allies. Konoha felt safer under their watch. Criminals and dark forces found it difficult to operate there. The Hokage warned villagers not to provoke Naruto, explaining that his servants protected him fiercely and would deal with threats decisively. The villagers had discovered many incapacitated attackers in the aftermath of recent confrontations, a grim testament to how thoroughly the defenders had neutralized danger. Naruto stood atop a lofty vantage point, surveying Konoha with a small, contented smile. As the Jinchuriki, he glanced toward the wall displaying portraits of the ancient Hokages and reflected on the steady state of things. Musashi called to him from a rooftop, addressing him as master. Naruto acknowledged that he had been waiting for the next step. Musashi, a samurai known for her legend, announced that the test was beginning. Naruto and Musashi leaped from the roof and landed together, then set off toward their next destination in the world. Naruto and Musashi felt the villagers' glares as they entered. Musashi had introduced herself to the class and announced she was Naruto's bride, and the revelation set the crowd whispering with jealousy and disbelief. Some villagers reacted with astonishment at the presence of the legendary Miyamoto Musashi, others said they had thought such a legend no longer existed. Another wondered if they were dreaming. Someone else was surprised that Musashi was a woman. Naruto bristled at the rude stares and thought about teaching the offenders a lesson. Musashi reassured him that she would handle the situation and set things right. Naruto chuckled at her confidence. Musashi then stepped close, gave him a quick, friendly hug at his right arm, and Naruto flushed in surprise as she publicly stood by his side. Several of the other attendants reacted with vocal displeasure. Oda demanded an explanation in a sharp tone. Jalter accused Musashi of daring to stake a claim. Mordred insisted on spending time with Naruto. Tamamo objected strongly, insisting that no one else take him. The commotion from the women who wanted Naruto grew noisy, and Naruto sighed, preparing to calm them down. Time passed, and the setting shifted to the battle arena. The Hokage had encouraged the students to challenge the servants, and the students stepped forward to test themselves. Naruto selected a group of servants to face the challengers. The matchups were announced: Gaara vs. King Hasen, Rock Lee vs. Lee Shuwen, Sakura Haruno vs. Quetzalcoatl, Shikamaru Nara vs. Siyu, Hinata Hyuga vs. Ishtar, Niji Hyuga vs. Ingram Mainyu, Tenten vs. Elizabeth Bathory, Choji Akimichi vs. Iskandar, Ino Yamanaka vs. Nero Claudius, Kiba Inuzuka vs. Darius III, Kabuto vs. Sasaki Koji. The announcers signaled the start of the battles, and the students took their seats while the audience stood to watch. Gaara drew upon his sand and faced King Hasen. Naruto warned the Hokage and the adult shinobi that King Hasen embodied death itself and would be incredibly difficult to defeat. King Hasen stood calmly as Gaara unleashed his sand techniques, but Hasan's own power interacted with the sand and countered Gaara's assault. The boy was pulled into another space, and the sudden shift opened into a flashback as memories rushed in. When King Hasen heard what had happened, he realized the truth. Sasuke sought power to kill the man responsible for the massacre of the Uchiha clan. Sasuke could not forgive his brother for what he had done. Seeing the boy's tragic past, King Hasen understood that Sasuke intended to take Naruto's power to confront Itachi. King Hasen warned Hokage Sarutobi to be careful with Uchiha. He explained that Sasuke wanted power from their master to enact his revenge. Sarutobi said he understood and would look into the matter. King Hasen replied that if the boy tried to kill their master they would show him no mercy, then took his leave. Sarutobi sat alone and considered the situation, knowing he would have to be cautious about the strange events unfolding. Time passed. Back with Naruto, he began intense training. The servants pushed him through many stages that tested his endurance and skill. He kept running, learned martial arts, and refused to stop. He needed to survive and complete his challenge so he could become the warrior and hero he aspired to be. In a surge of resolve, Naruto moved forward and threw himself into the next trial. Gaara felt crushed by the way his power had made him into an outcast. He knelt on the ground, overwhelmed by sorrow, until King Hasen approached. King Hasen asked if Gaara wanted a normal life with friends and family. Gaara admitted that he did, but doubted how it could happen because nobody wanted him and he felt hated. King Hasen advised him that sometimes hatred must be ignored and asked if Gaara would accept a second chance to feel human again. Gaara nodded and allowed himself a small, relieved cry. An official announcement declared King Hasen the winner. He left the arena, and Gaara rose and returned to his seat. The next match was Rock Lee against Lee Shuwen. Rock Lee stood ready and introduced himself to the older man. Lee Shuwen confirmed who he was and asked if Rock was prepared. A servant intervened briefly, and Lee made it clear he would not hold back. The battle began. Lee moved with calm, practiced precision. The students watching were surprised by his power and control. He was a servant capable of defeating anyone who stood in his way. Rock Lee found himself breathing hard, pushed to his limits by Lee's relentless, disciplined strikes. He realized he had underestimated the older man. Lee remained composed and continued to press the attack in fast, decisive exchanges, testing Rock Lee's stamina and technique. Li Shuwen struck Rock with relentless force. Rock could and collapsed, rendered unconscious. The students and adults watched in horror at how unexpectedly powerful the old man was. Li Shuwen requested that the boy receive medical attention, and the announcer nodded. A servant carried Rock away. The announcer then declared Li Shuwen the winner, and he and the announcer clapped politely. The announcer next called for the match between Sakura Haruno and Quetzalcoatl. Sakura stood and prepared to face the formidable adult woman. Quetzalcoatl greeted Sakura with a warm expression and a slight smile. Sakura, bristling with determination and jealousy over Naruto, insisted she would not back down and intended to win. Quetzalcoatl observed that Sakura's feelings for their master had made her act like a punching bag at times and said she would teach her a real lesson, a remark that unnerved Sakura and the others. When the match began, Sakura unleashed her techniques and fought with everything she had, but her strikes had little effect. Quetzalcoatl calmly noted that it was her turn, then quickly overwhelmed Sakura with swift, overwhelming attacks and slammed her to the ground. Naruto feared the worst for Sakura as the crowd reeled from the abrupt turn of events. To be continued. Somewhere else, 4 figures ran toward Konoha, heading for the arena. They were students of Orochimaru carrying out his plan, to kill the Hokage and plant explosives in the arena where the crowds were gathered. One of them confirmed they had arrived and reminded the others that their task was to set the bombs. Another expressed concern about rumors that powerful allies might stop them, referring to the Jinchuriki and his rumored servants. They hurried to finish placing the charges. The group Kidamu, Sakan and Yukon, Tayuya, and Jirobo set their devices against the walls. Suddenly they sensed another presence and dodged as a slash severed a paper tag attached to an explosive device. Startled, they looked up to see 2 figures approaching. One introduced herself as Salter and the other as Jalter. They declared that they would not allow the attack to proceed and that they knew about Orochimaru's plans. Jirobo demanded to know who the newcomers were. Tia suggested they might be the allies the rumors spoke of. Kidamu raged at how they had learned of the plan, but Jalter said they already knew the truth. Sakan and Yukon charged, only to be knocked down by a sudden, powerful kick from another servant, an assassin named Shinjunku. The Sound 4 regrouped as Kidamu barked orders for Tayuya and Jirobo to join him while Yukon and Sakan dealt with the newcomer. The 5 attackers took up fighting stances while the 3 servants prepared to meet them. The scene froze on the tense confrontation as they prepared to engage. Time passed, and the action returned to the arena. The list continued. 2 of the ninja students had already been defeated by the servants and were sent to medical attention. Only the following matchups remained. Shikamaru Nara vs. Siyu. Hinata Hyuga vs. Ishtar. Niji Hyuga vs. Ingramenyu. Ten vs. Elizabeth Bathory. Choji Akimichi vs. Iskandar. Ino Yamanaka vs. Nero Claudius. Kiba Inazuka vs. Darius III. Kabuto vs. Sasaki Koji. Shikamaru dodged Siyu's sweeping spear and narrowly avoided a move. The servant toyed with the boy, who still did not reveal the full extent of his skill. Shikamaru moved through the necessary hand signs and formed 15 shadow clones. The clones charged and Siyu laughed at the trick. Using fluid, practiced movements, the lancer drove the spear through one clone after another until they dissipated. Shikamaru, startled by how effortlessly his illusions had been pierced, realized how strong Siyu truly was. Siyu struck Shikamaru in the stomach, forcing him to his knees, then kicked him down and rendered him unconscious. The announcer declared Siyu Kuchulain the winner, and the crowd erupted in cheers at the display of the servant's power. Hinata faced Ishtar alone. The goddess unleashed a radiant blast of golden energy from her weapon that overwhelmed Hinata and sent her off the stage. Next up, Niji faced Ingramenyu. Niji considered his opponent carefully, trying to anticipate the next move. Ingra taunted that victory would be out of reach, then vanished, slipping past Niji's guard. Shadowy hands rose from the ground and reached for Niji, but he rolled and flipped away, landing lightly. He scanned the arena but found no sign of the servant. When Ingra revealed himself behind Niji, he lunged with a sudden, brutal slam that knocked Niji unconscious. The announcer declared Ingramenyu the winner. The Hokage watched with a slight smirk, Kakashi remained silent, and Orochimaru observed the matches with a thoughtful, troubled expression. He found it strange that the servants fought directly rather than relying on malicious techniques and wondered what that meant for the long fight ahead. Tenten's bout with Elizabeth Bathory was disrupted by a piercing, otherworldly song. Tenten covered her ears to block the sound, struggling to maintain her focus. Choji and Iskandar turned their match into an eating contest. They devoured enormous amounts of food with enthusiastic hunger. In the end, Iskandar emerged victorious, and Choji was left uncomfortably full. Ino faced Nero Claudius in a contest of presence and skill. Nero won the match. A brief pause followed as the competitors regrouped. Kiba was overwhelmed by Darius III, who defeated him after a fierce exchange. Kabuto attempted to challenge Sasaki Koji, but Sasaki's blade struck with swift precision and left Kabuto unable to continue. The announcer declared the servants the winners of the round. Time passed, and the event moved forward. Back at the gathering known as the Sound Four, the next stages of the contest were already beginning to take shape. Tayuya hit the ground, wounded after Jalter speared her with her weapon. She saw Kadamaru preparing a hand technique. She used her spear to block the strike and then unleashed a burst of flame that forced Kadamaru back in pain. Jirobo engaged Salter with his katana drawn, attempting to strike the Dark Knight, but her blade shattered his katana. He still had many weapons at his disposal. Tayuya thought that these opponents were not to be underestimated. They were incredibly strong. Kadamaru wondered what she was made of and turned his head to see the twin brothers battling the servant Yenqing. Yenqing dominated them with swift, brutal efficiency and left the twins unable to continue. Kadamaru ordered a retreat and urged the others to fall back. The combatants began to run, but Jalter suddenly appeared in their path. The four were stunned to see the servants standing alone and ready to engage them. Salter reminded everyone that they must not damage the village, but Jalter dismissed the warning and prepared her noble Phantasm. She then unleashed a powerful finishing attack. The attack overwhelmed Kadamaru and Jirobo. Jalter's flames had engulfed them, and they were quickly incapacitated and left motionless on the ground. Tayuya remained standing. She turned to face Jalter with her sword drawn and aimed at Jalter's throat. Jalter asked if Tayuya would surrender, an evil smirk on her face. Back with Naruto, servants informed him that the assault at the arena was finished. The attackers had been dealt with. One of them, Tayuya, had been captured alive and had confessed to the servants. Naruto thought that Orochimaru must have been trying to blow the place up. The announcer called that Naruto Uzumaki's next opponent was Sasuke. Naruto told himself it was time and stepped forward to face him. Sasuke vowed that he would defeat Naruto, take his power, avenge that man, and rebuild the Uchiha clan. Naruto replied that Sasuke was dreaming and prepared to fight. They charged at each other. Naruto blocked Sasuke's attacks and countered his techniques. When Naruto opened his eyes, a mystic blue glow momentarily froze Sasuke. Sasuke's own gaze flashed with a hint of red, but he could not avoid Naruto's onslaught. Naruto struck relentlessly, overwhelming Sasuke as the other students watched in horror, certain Sasuke had been decisively beaten. Sakura thought Naruto had completely overpowered him and wondered what kind of training had produced such an aggressive style. She watched the one she admired being overwhelmed. Naruto's movements carried the precision of intense martial arts. When the clash ended, Sasuke lay on the ground, unable to continue. Naruto asked if that was enough. Sasuke tried to respond, but an explosion erupted overhead before they could resume. The announcer shouted for everyone to evacuate and flee to the exits. Naruto decided it was time for his allies to step forward and handle the remaining ninjas. Later, on the Hokage's rooftop, the Hokage stood watch until he sensed a presence approaching. The figure revealed himself to be Orochimaru. Orochimaru demanded to know why the bomb had not detonated. The Hokage observed that Naruto and his allies had cleared the threat. Orochimaru reacted with anger and surly surprise and moved to engage the old man. Orochimaru had overreached against Medusa and found himself outmatched by her unexpected speed and strength. Sarutobi watched, stunned by how dangerous she was. Orochimaru, furious, attempted to summon a giant snake with a hand technique, materializing a long serpent that resembled an anaconda. Medusa removed her blndfld, revealing purple, glowing mystic eyes. Sarutobi reacted with alarm and attempted to speak, but Medusa warned him not to look. He obeyed, and the summoned snake froze as if turned to stone. Orochimaru found himself immobilized and raged at his inability to move. Medusa told him calmly that she could turn him to stone and that there was no escape. She held a dagger and prepared to finish him, demanding to know who she was. She replied only that she was something beyond his imagination. Orochimaru used a smoke technique and disappeared, slipping away despite his predicament. Sarutobi noted that Orochimaru had escaped. Medusa allowed him to go for now, saying the snake had learned a lesson and would not get far. She watched him leave, certain he had more plans and would return. Later, Medusa observed Orochimaru retreating and acknowledged to her Greek servant that he was clever. He had escaped to prepare a larger scheme and would likely target the Hokage when he returned. Sarutobi coughed and crouched, struggling to rise. Medusa helped the elderly man up and commented on his frailty. Sarutobi admitted his health was failing but insisted he would manage. Medusa suggested taking him to their master, who would worry. Sarutobi recognized her concern for that master. Medusa, however, made it clear she would not forgive the village for how they had treated him. Medusa accused the village of vilifying their master at birth and forcing him to endure constant contempt. She told Sarutobi that any lesser person would have broken, and it was no wonder the master resented them. Sarutobi was visibly moved. Medusa then suggested that perhaps humans deserve judgment, but she said that decision would be left to him and urged Sarutobi to pray for mercy, because they would not show any themselves. Sarutobi sighed and promised to help Naruto and to avoid repeating past mistakes, and the servitors escorted him to their master. Time passed. Naruto watched as the attackers were met by fierce resistance from two servants. One revealed himself as the berserker Xiangyu, wielding 6 arms and multiple blades. He moved like a whirlwind, cleaving through the front lines and leaving the enemy routed in his wake. The scene played like an intense, stylized combat sequence from an anime: swift strikes, dramatic parries, and opponents driven back or subdued without any graphic detail. Nearby, Ashiwakamaru fought with equal ferocity, her katana allowing her to cut through enemy formations. Her shouts and charges scattered the attackers, and those who stood against her were quickly overwhelmed. The two servants together neutralized many foes, and the battlefield quieted as the immediate threat was ended. Medusa announced to Naruto that the old man was alive and helped him sit. Naruto breathed easier and said they should let the elder rest and prepare to move. Before he could finish, Medusa stepped close and offered a sudden, gentle gesture of affection, a brief, chaste embrace and a soft touch to his forehead that caught him by surprise. He felt confused for a moment, then relaxed as she smiled. The other servants around them reacted with a variety of emotions. Some watched with amusement, others with mild irritation, and a few with quiet possessiveness. The atmosphere hummed with tension and unexpected warmth, and then the group turned their focus back to the task at hand, preparing for whatever came next. The girls burst from their hiding places and enveloped Naruto in a flurry of hugs, each vying to take him out on a date by herself. They argued loudly, but Ashiwakamaru stepped forward and insisted that she would join her lord because she wanted to spend time with him alone. Sarutobi sat back and chuckled, thinking to himself that Kushina and Minato would be glad to see such a peaceful moment. He felt content watching the town settle, though he quietly acknowledged to himself that his time was not unlimited and that preparations for a successor would need to be made. Time passed. Inside Naruto's mind, a massive cage loomed, and beyond it stood a creature of enormous size. The beast towered over everything, an immense fox more than 50 feet tall. Naruto felt the weight of its presence and the echoes of power that had been witnessed and cultivated by his allies and trainers. Kurama, the 9-tailed beast, growled as he watched the boy grow stronger with the help of his companions. The fox's dark, resonant voice noted the change with wary curiosity. Then a new presence arrived, an aura like nothing Kurama had sensed before. A figure appeared, radiating authority and an almost maternal calm. It was Tiamat, a being of overwhelming presence. Kurama snapped to attention and questioned the stranger in his manner, unsure why her presence stirred a strange unease. The woman approached the cage and broke the confinement that held the fox. The beast rose in angry defiance. Tiamat raised a hand and instructed Kurama to calm down, guiding him gently away from the cage. When she touched his face, the monstrous shape softened into something unexpectedly gentle. Kurama felt warmth from her touch and found himself unaccustomed to such comfort, wondering why the sensation had such an effect on him. Tiamat soothed him, assuring him that he need not be afraid and that she would offer her help. Morning came. Naruto lived in the forest of death now, exiled by the village's suspicion after destruction had occurred. His servants guarded him fiercely. They were ruthless toward anyone who threatened their master, and the villagers learned to give them a wide berth. The Hokage lay in a hospital, weakened by illness and unable to attend to affairs directly, which left Naruto to remain in the forest and await developments. The matter that weighed on him most was the man behind the recent explosion, Orochimaru, and Naruto resolved to hunt him down. Naruto considered his plan quietly. He told Artoria that he intended to go after Orochimaru. Artoria affirmed that she would accompany him. Jin asked if he was certain, and Naruto confirmed that he would not allow Orochimaru to escape and that the threat needed to be stopped. Nero declared her willingness to join, Siu pledged his support, and Iskandar encouraged them all to show their enemies what to fear. Diarmuid announced that it was time to fight, and Hercules gave a fierce roar of readiness. Naruto gathered the weapons given to him by his servants. A katana at his waist, a double-barrel pump-action shotgun slung behind him, and a revolver holstered at his side. He explained to his retainers that Orochimaru likely had larger plans and might be coordinating with others, and that they needed to uncover who was behind the deeper conspiracy. The servants smiled with resolve as their master shifted into the role of warrior and protector. Artoria, Jin, Nero, Siu, Iskandar, Diarmuid, Hercules, and the others all pledged to go with Naruto. Together they prepared to confront Orochimaru and his forces, determined to defend their master and put an end to the threat. Naruto set out with his servants to track down the snake and hunt him without delay. A while later, attention returned to Orochimaru. He sat alone in his large hideout, frustration churning in his mind as he surveyed the aftermath. His students had been routed by those servants, utterly overwhelmed by enemies far stronger than he had anticipated. No jutsu or technique he tried could stop them, and no one in his ranks had been able to stand against those attackers. He thought through his options and searched for a new plan. Orochimaru shouted that he needed more time to deal with the brat and those servants, incredulous that they believed they could take him down. The Hokage knelt on the ground, breathing shallowly and clearly tired. He was an ancient ninja, one of the strongest, yet he insisted on carrying the duty of Hokage himself. Sarutobi watched Orochimaru prepare to continue the fight when a sudden, powerful kick sent Orochimaru sprawling to the ground. Orochimaru reacted in surprise. Sarutobi turned his head to see who had intervened and found himself staring at a tall, striking woman with long hair and a snake motif on her forehead. Sarutobi recognized her as a Greek servant, the legendary Medusa, whose gaze could petrify opponents. Orochimaru demanded to know her identity as she stood with a dagger attached to a chain, clearly ready to fight. Sarutobi asked if she was one of the servants from the deck, and Medusa suggested that he stay down and let her handle Orochimaru, noting that their shared snake attributes made the contest personal. Orochimaru questioned whether she had the techniques to take him down, and Medusa replied that she was not what he expected. They rushed at each other. Their clash was a rapid, stylized exchange dodges, counters, and swift strikes that resembled an intense anime duel rather than a brutal brawl. Orochimaru evaded several attacks and attempted to use his own techniques, but Medusa landed a fierce kick that sent him to the ground. When he rose, he realized she was faster and more agile than he had anticipated. A distant explosion announced fresh fighting elsewhere, and Sarutobi heard the sounds of battle beyond the clearing. A force of assassins had descended on the battlefield, sweeping forward with coordinated precision. The unit known as the 100 of Faces moved among the ninjas with professional speed, neutralizing opponents before they could react. The defending ninjas were overwhelmed as the assassins struck with practiced efficiency. Naruto appeared on the scene, walking forward with a revolver in one hand and a katana at his side. He was not alone. Serenity supported him, urging him to stay close, and Naruto acknowledged her. Kyoheim observed the attackers with quiet confidence, noting that mortals had dared to challenge them and that they would prove superior. The three advanced toward Orochimaru, passing other servants who were already engaged in combat. Artoria and Salter fought ahead, cutting through waves of attackers with disciplined swordwork. Naruto drew upon his summoning and called forth savage allies. The Hessian Lobo emerged with a howl that shook the air, and the nearby ninjas reacted with fear at the sight of the unnatural beast. Many of them faltered as the summoned servants moved like living weapons, routing groups of foes with overwhelming force. Naruto fired his shotgun, sending attackers crashing back against walls and creating openings for his allies to exploit. 200 or so soldiers pressed the field, a surprisingly large force that had been gathered by Orochimaru. Suddenly, a new servant arrived on horseback, leading a contingent that charged into the fray. The green-haired Greek spear-wielder Achilles leapt into the center of the attackers, slashing with broad, practiced sweeps. He called out for Orochimaru to come out and berated the enemy for cowardice, insisting they could not handle him and his allies. The surrounding ninjas drew their weapons to protect their master and rushed Achilles. When the attackers struck, Achilles met them with disciplined spear work, his movements precise and devastating in effect. Dozens of opponents were quickly defeated by his coordinated strikes, their assaults broken and scattered. Nearby, Xiang Yu advanced like a juggernaut, charging through the ranks with unstoppable momentum and preparing to unleash his noble phantasm. The battlefield became a whirlwind of stylized clashes and sweeping maneuvers, each servant executing signature moves that turned the tide without graphic injury or gore. The confrontation continued to escalate on multiple fronts, each side matching the other's intensity. Where gaps opened after fierce exchanges, fighters filled them quickly and continued pressing forward. The air was filled with the sounds of blades, summons, and shouts as the servants and their allies pressed their advantage in a fast, cinematic battle. Karna cut through the host of ninjas single-handedly, sweeping forward with precise, relentless strikes and taking down wave after wave. He turned and scanned the battlefield, spotting more enemies ahead. The servants charged as one and cleared the area with practiced efficiency. Orochimaru, fleeing from his hideout, watched from the edge of the battle and felt a rare unease at the servants' ferocity. Before he could fully retreat, a sudden dropkick struck his chest and sent him tumbling down the stairs to the ground. He glanced up and saw Medusa standing alone. Orochimaru snarled and unleashed several jutsu, hoping to overwhelm her, but Medusa moved with superior speed and dodged each attack without being struck. Orochimaru demanded how she intended to keep fighting like this, and Medusa made it clear she had no patience for him and intended to end the threat he posed. Before he could respond, Serenity appeared, touched Orochimaru, and slipped a poisonous effect into him while telling him to survive. She then vanished, and Orochimaru stumbled as the poison began to take hold. Naruto urged Medusa to act, and Medusa acknowledged him as her master. Orochimaru cursed that the Akatsuki would be waiting to strike them all, but his words were heard only as a distraction. Medusa recognized his momentary lapse and prepared a decisive attack. She unleashed her noble phantasm, a focused, overwhelming surge of energy that struck Orochimaru. The blast engulfed him and the nearby troops in a brilliant, non-graphic burst, scattering the remaining ninjas into the air and leaving Orochimaru's presence dissolved into drifting light and ash. The assault cleared the battlefield without lingering gore. Naruto praised the counterattack and warned that they needed to move before the situation worsened. He then called to Karna to finish the battle. Karna answered Naruto as his master and gathered his power for a final strike. He unleashed his noble phantasm, a radiant spear of divine light that struck the hideout and swept through the remaining forces, destroying the stronghold and ending the resistance. Orochimaru was dead, and now more enemies would appear in the world. The next morning, rumors swept through the village and beyond. Word had spread that the traitor had fallen by Naruto's hand, aided by the servants who had overwhelmed many opponents. Villagers and shinobi alike spoke in hushed tones of how the servants and Naruto had cut down the attacking forces. Few had been able to stand against them. The stories painted Naruto as a terrifying figure, a lesson to those who might threaten the village. The Hokage observed the reports and coughed, wincing slightly. Kakashi remarked that Naruto had become frightening, having taken so many foes. Iruka pointed out that the servants must have been training Naruto to move and fight in ways he never had before. Kurenai asked what they should do about him, and the Hokage, sitting on the edge of a bed, sighed before answering. The Hokage said that they should leave Naruto alone for now, and use the situation as a warning. He instructed them to watch the village and to keep the civilians away from Naruto until they better understood what was happening. Asuma questioned whether they were truly expected to monitor Naruto, and the Hokage fixed them with a serious look before asking whether they wanted the village destroyed. The question silenced them. The Hokage explained that the servants were far more powerful than they realized. He said that 34 attackers had already been eliminated by the servants when they tried to strike Naruto, and warned that if more foes came, the servants might unleash something even more devastating. He emphasized that the servants could not be taken lightly and that their actions might cause widespread destruction if provoked. Kakashi and Anko had witnessed noble phantasms in action. Lancelot, Artoria, Ashwaukamar, and Salter, and the sight reinforced the Hokage's warning. Anko acknowledged the point and agreed they needed to be cautious. The others nodded, fearful that the servants might unleash a catastrophic power if pressed. The Hokage warned Kakashi not to do anything reckless, and Kakashi agreed before departing. The Hokage then turned to the window of the hospital and watched the village below, thinking through the problem alone. In a flashback, the Hokage recalled a battle between ninja students and the servants. He had seen Ishtar confront a young Hinata. Hinata would not back down. Her determination came from her deep feelings for Naruto and her desire to protect what mattered to her. Hinata declared that she would defeat Ishtar to make Naruto happy, and Ishtar dismissed her as foolish. Ishtar then unleashed her noble phantasm, a powerful, radiant attack aimed at the Hyuga girl. The strike landed and the scene became chaotic. A brief neutral moment bridged the aftermath, and the story moved on. To be continued. Hinata lay on the ground, bruised and exhausted from Ishtar's attack. She asked Ishtar to promise that she would love Naruto forever. Ishtar answered that she would, but she also invited Hinata to join their side. Hinata, surprised and relieved, accepted the offer after Ishtar explained that she could fight alongside Naruto. Hinata thanked her, then the goddess's servant finished the encounter. The next battle began, this time between Ino and Nero Claudius. Ino felt a spike of jealousy at Nero's radiant appearance and struggled to hide it. Nero told Ino that she was uniquely beautiful and urged her to accept herself as she was. The two clashed. Ino tried to use her techniques, but Nero proved unstoppable. Nero unleashed a powerful noble phantasm that struck with overwhelming force and sent Ino flying off the stage. Ino was defeated and tumbled to the ground below. Nero sighed, told Ino she should strive to be the person she wanted to be, and then departed. The Hokage watched the battles with a small, weary smile, knowing the servants had held back and spared the young ninja students. He trusted Naruto to continue his journey and felt the need to keep an eye on Sasuke. The flashback ended. The Hokage sighed, hoped for a safe future, sat on his bed, and rested for a moment. Time passed. Naruto, the Jinchuriki, walked through the town accompanied by 7 of his servants: Salter, Jalter, Artoria, Medusa, Kyoheim, Medea, Serenity, and Oda, with Jackie perched on his shoulder. He observed that the world had not changed peacefully. Medusa agreed and warned that anyone who tried to harm Naruto or them would face consequences. Naruto complimented Medusa on her eyes, and she blushed at his kindness. He realized he had been momentarily distracted and moved on. Salter suggested they do some shopping, and Oda asked where they should go. Naruto decided they should explore the town and see what it had to offer. As they walked, Oda and Jalter kept close to him, taking his arms and showing their devotion in gentle, affectionate ways. Jackie chirped happily on his shoulder, enjoying the company. Serenity slipped an arm around Naruto from behind and reflected on his past suffering, expressing regret that she had not been there to save him earlier and vowing to protect him now. Medea promised to help ease his pain. Their quiet support lifted Naruto's spirits, and they continued their stroll through the streets. On nearby rooftops, other ninja watched the group. Kurenai noted that Naruto seemed happy, and Asuma suggested they follow at a distance to make sure nothing happened to them, reminding her that the village had already been warned. They kept watch as Naruto and his companions went on, blending into the town's bustle. The girls and Naruto had been enjoying themselves, sharing a cheerful moment together and exchanging warm, affectionate gestures. They all seemed to be having a good time with their master as they prepared to go out when someone called out to Naruto from a distance. A man stepped forward into the town, older and striking, with long white hair and an easy, confident air. He had been searching for a blonde, spiky-haired boy with whisker marks on his face, Naruto, and now he thought he might have found him, though the boy seemed older than he remembered. The man sighed at the thought that he might be late for a meeting and moved closer to confirm. When the boy turned, the man announced himself as Jiraiya and introduced himself as Naruto's godfather. The servants and attendants nearby reacted with surprise at the claim. Musashi immediately demanded to know who the stranger was, and several others, Jack, Amiya, Siyu, Medusa, and Oda, formed a defensive ring around him, weapons raised in a tense standoff. Jiraiya himself was taken aback by the sudden appearance of so many strong presences. He had not expected Naruto to be so well guarded. Siyu pressed for an explanation of Jiraiya's identity and intentions. Jiraiya explained that he had come to visit and to find Naruto. Oda, speaking with hard authority as one of Naruto's guardians, challenged him and reminded him of the recent troubles in the village, making it clear she did not trust strangers who appeared at such a volatile time. Medusa questioned his motives with a cold, watchful glare. As the surrounding crowd had already been evacuated to avoid provoking the servants, the scene remained tense but non-violent, like an anime standoff where everyone was poised and alert rather than acting on impulse. Naruto stepped forward and asked Jiraiya if he knew anything about his parents. Jiraiya replied that he did, and he produced a photograph. Naruto took the paper and recognized the faces of Minato Namikaze and Kushina Uzumaki as his parents. He accepted that the photograph showed the people who had raised him. With questions still in the air, Naruto decided that they should bring Jiraiya into the forest to learn more about his purpose there. The servants agreed and prepared to escort the older man away so they could learn the truth at a safer remove, leaving the town to its quieter routines. Asuma and Kurenai, who had been watching Naruto and the servants, vanished without warning and set off together to discover what to do about Jiraiya. Asuma told himself that the situation did not look good. Later, Naruto and the servants arrived at a remote clearing. Jiraiya sat tied to a chair and unable to move. He forced himself to be patient as the servants glared at him. The godfather realized this was dangerous, that their hatred for him had not vanished after his absence. Naruto told Jiraiya that it was time to talk and asked why he had come. Jiraiya asked where he was and wondered aloud if this was the Forest of Death. Naruto confirmed that it was. Jiraiya sighed and then explained everything he could remember about what had happened. Naruto listened, believing some of it and weighing the rest. When Jiraiya asked whether Naruto would trust him now, Naruto answered that he did trust him, but he would not easily forgive Jiraiya for having abandoned him. Jiraiya expressed remorse, apologized for leaving, and promised to honor the commitment he had been given. Tears came to Jiraiya's eyes, and Naruto gave him a second chance, watching the older man with guarded acceptance. A year passed. In that time Naruto and Jiraiya grew closer, and the servants trained Naruto in many disciplines. He developed skill with sword and firearm and learned techniques that made him a disciplined, formidable fighter. He spent 10 months training in the woods, pushed hard and growing steadily stronger. One day, Naruto noticed 3 people approaching, Anko, Hinata, and Jiraiya, with Hercules advancing behind them. Naruto wondered what had brought them out. To the woods. Anko began to deliver bad news, but Jiraiya finished for her and revealed that the Hokage had died. Naruto's expression hardened. He took in the news with a heavy, quiet sadness. Jiraiya explained that the Hokage had been ill, suffering from a heart condition and cancer. Naruto asked when the funeral would be held. Jiraiya said it would be the next day and then asked if Naruto planned to attend. Naruto agreed to go, saying that the Hokage had been a friend and a father figure to him. They exchanged a brief, solemn moment before the visitors departed. Alone afterward, Naruto let his grief show. He wept openly and was comforted by the female servants, who gathered around to protect and steady him. They helped him prepare to return and to face the funeral. As they worked, they all wondered who would step forward to become the next Hokage. Rain fell over the village as people gathered to honor Sarutobi, the Hokage. The funeral grounds were filled with mourners, and among them were Naruto's friends and Hinata, sitting in quiet grief. After a while, the sound of approaching footsteps announced someone else's arrival. Naruto walked forward alone, flanked by his attendants. Naruto's face was drawn and subdued as he moved toward the ceremony. The crowd glanced fearfully at the Jinchuriki. Some held wary looks, but the attendants' stern presence silenced anyone who might cause trouble, and the murmurs died away. Naruto's friends and fellow students noticed his arrival and managed small, appreciative smiles at his being there on time. Hinata saw the pain in his expression and understood, at once, how much he carried inside. A mournful song seemed to hang over the crowd, reflecting themes of distance, regret, and things left unsaid, deepening the sense of loss. Naruto stood before the fallen Hokage and apologized, expressing regret that he had not been able to visit and hoping that the old man might find peace and freedom. He looked up at the rain-filled sky, then stepped back and joined his attendants. The monks continued their prayers, and the ceremony moved forward. A flashback followed. The flashback ended. Naruto lingered on the memories of the Hokage, noticing again how trustworthy the old man had seemed, how strong he truly was, and how kind he had been to him. He turned to watch the sun nearly set, sighed, and allowed a small smile. Naruto told himself that the old man had always been the best for him, a father figure he would not forget. The next morning, Naruto walked with Jiraiya and their servants as they continued their journey. They traveled in relaxed conversation, sometimes seeming as if they moved in astral form, and Jiraiya mentioned another candidate for the Hokage, a former student of Sarutobi who was no longer in the village and had gone to another village and realm. Naruto asked Jiraiya whether this woman was a good person. Jiraiya admitted that she was, but added that she had a problem with drinking, which made Naruto groan and caused a few of the servants to chuckle. Naruto shook his head and moved ahead with the others as he and his godfather resumed their travel. They did not notice two figures standing beneath the trees, watching the Jinchuriki and his guardian pass by. The two were members of the Akatsuki, observing silently. One noted that the Jinchuriki was present, the other asked whether they should attack immediately. The first counseled patience, saying they would wait until night and call for reinforcements. They discussed rumors of powerful allies aligned with the nine-tailed fox and debated whether the rumors of summoned allies were true. Unseen by them, Pale Rider, known as Pestilence, had been watching and witnessed their exchange. The travelers continued on their way, enjoying conversation as the day wore on. Later that night, Naruto and Jiraiya slept in a campsite in the forest. Naruto lay down and soon felt Reiku appear. She settled beside him and offered a comforting touch as she told him to sleep without fear of nightmares. Her hand stroked his hair, giving him a warm, safe feeling, and he thought that she smelled very pleasant. As she watched him drift off, Reiku sensed danger approaching. She detected hostile forces gathering and knew trouble was coming. Under cover of darkness, a force of 75 hostile ninjas prepared to strike. 2 Akatsuki members moved among them, confident the attack would go ahead as planned. Suddenly, knives thudded into the earth and the attackers flinched. A booming laugh echoed through the trees. A massive warrior in a helmet erupted into the clearing and immediately launched into combat. Spartacus appeared, delivering powerful, stylized strikes that sent several attackers flying and broke their formation in dramatic, anime-style fashion. His battle cry reverberated as he swung a great sword, scattering the enemy ranks without any graphic detail. The 2 Akatsuki members realized at once that they had been ambushed and shouted that it was a trap. One of them swore in surprise. Figures emerged to reinforce the defenders. Artoria, Okita Tsuji, Lancelot, Iskandar, Jalter, Salter, Billy the Kid, Ashvatthana, Saidu, Sasaki, and the Knights of the Round Table all revealed themselves. The would-be attackers found themselves confronted by a powerful, organized counterattack. Artoria slammed her sword into the ground, creating a burst of light that sent the attacking ninjas flying. They hit the earth and staggered as she closed the distance, moving with decisive strikes that knocked them out of the fight. She gathered a surge of golden energy in her blade and released it in a bright arc that swept through the ranks, dispatching the remaining attackers. She adopted a fighting stance, ran forward, and leapt into another clean, powerful slash that put more enemies down. Okita moved with precise, blurring cuts, her katana slicing through the assailants and neutralizing each threat in turn. When one of the attackers lunged from behind, she reacted instantly, using her sword to stop the enemy and end the attack. She gripped her blade with unwavering strength and pushed through the formation, forcing the rest of the assailants back with a string of rapid strikes. Iskandar slammed his hand into the face of an attacker, sending him reeling, then carved through a trio of assailants with broad, sweeping blows. When another charged, Iskandar grabbed the attacker by the throat, lifted him, and struck him hard enough to send him tumbling into his comrades and knock them down. With a victorious whistle, he summoned his chariot and mount, leaped aboard, and let the beasts thunder forward to trample the remaining enemies. He laughed loudly as he taunted the opposition and tore through the attackers with relentless, overwhelming force. Iskandar laughed uproariously and taunted the attackers, mocking their strength while continuing to press the assault with his bare hands. Siyu reveled in the chaos, moving like a whirlwind with spear and fists. He spun and struck, cutting through the enemy ranks with fierce, controlled strikes. When more ninjas descended on him, he smirked, whirled his spear, and efficiently put them out of commission. He landed among them and challenged the survivors, his presence causing the remaining attackers to falter as they watched their comrades fall. The ninjas answered with a war cry and charged, but Siyu backflipped, landed with a predatory grin, and finished them off with relentless, skillful blows. Siyu taunted the attackers, daring them to come at him, and then resumed his onslaught with a focused intensity that quickly ended the threat. The remaining assailants had no answer for the servants' coordinated power. Lancelot, in his berserker fury, tore through the enemy formation with brutal efficiency, sending opponents flying and striking down those who tried to stand. He kicked one attacker skyward and then summoned Rangaminiad, charging forward with the sword to slice through the rest of the formation and break their momentum. Two Akatsuki members watched in stunned silence as the servants annihilated the ninja force. One of them trembled and wondered what the attackers were made of and whether they were even human. The other panicked at how helpless they were against this onslaught. Facing the devastation, they realized their group had been overwhelmed and that they were the only ones left standing. Lancelot roared in a frenzy, his anger pushing him beyond restraint as he continued to press the attack. He grabbed another assailant and used him to knock others aside, swinging through the enemy ranks until there were no more threats left. The two surviving Akatsuki members could only stare, shaken, and ask each other who these fighters were as the servants finished clearing the battlefield. The following morning, Naruto and Jiraiya woke and began interrogating the two surviving Akatsuki members to learn what had happened during the night. One of the attackers had been killed in the skirmish. The two who remained were identified as Yugo and Zetsu, the latter badly wounded. Naruto asked the servants for a full account of the previous night's events. Artoria explained that the attackers had been trying to kill Naruto and his godfather and had almost succeeded in abducting them. Jiraiya then began questioning Yugo and Zetsu to get the details. The questioning continued as they pieced together the rest of what had transpired. Siyu asked the others if anyone knew who they really were. Jin told Jiraiya that they appeared to be Akatsuki. Jiraiya acknowledged that he had heard of them and described them as dangerous bandits, almost like terrorists. Siyu then asked Jiraiya if he knew more. Jiraiya nodded and explained to the group and to Naruto that the Akatsuki were dangerous individuals responsible for violent attacks and the destruction of entire villages. Yugo sank to his knees and broke into a sweat as he realized that he and Zetsu were outmatched and outnumbered by these opponents. Yugo thought that he had not seen this coming. A flashback to the night followed. Two Akatsuki members watched as the servants swept through the battlefield, cutting down the ninja forces with ruthless efficiency. Realizing they could not hold them all, the two prepared to retreat. Juno swore in disbelief. Zetsu stammered that they needed to report to Pain and the others. Two voices announced that the pair were not going anywhere. The Akatsuki turned and saw 6 figures standing together: Salter, Okada Aizu, Lubu, Ushva, Bayaban Sith, and Carmilla. The 6 stood their ground while Juno and Zetsu took up fighting stances. Salter threatened them to prepare to die. Juno defiantly insisted they were not afraid. Lubu warned that they should be afraid. Okada demanded to know who had sent them to capture their master. Juno refused to answer until he returned to Pain. Bayaban asked who this Pain was. Zetsu used a jutsu to make spiked plants erupt from the ground. Juno tried to slip away, but a ring-shaped projectile struck him and sent him into a tree. Zetsu called out Juno's name and reached for him, sensing danger. Salter swung her blade behind and forced Zetsu to duck. Zetsu flipped backward and immediately took a slash across the chest from Okada, forcing him to grit his teeth and land hard. Salter, Okada, and Carmilla closed in and assaulted Zetsu fiercely. Juno landed and turned to see Lubu, Bayaban, and Ashvatthama closing in on him. Bayaban's noble phantasm struck Juno, making him gasp and step back as he tried to dodge. Ashvatthama then unleashed a powerful blast that hit Juno and hurled him through the air. Ashvatthama declared that it was his turn. The blast sent Juno skidding to the ground. He was breathing heavily as he scrambled to put distance between himself and the servants, desperate to retreat. Bayaban taunted that he would not escape. Lubu announced he would handle the matter and advanced toward Juno. Juno hid behind a tree and attempted to patch himself up, taking a pill and tending his wounds. Lubu watched him, smirked, released a fierce aura, and prepared to unleash his noble phantasm, telling himself that it was time to face him. In the flashback, Zetsu screamed as he was forced to his knees. A single, overwhelming attack from Okada's noble phantasm ended him instantly, leaving no chance to recover. Juno tried to crawl away, but a boot landed nearby. Bayaban smirked and warned that he would be kept alive until her master woke and demanded a word. She then stomped and rendered him unconscious. Naruto realized there were more of them in the world, individuals bent on capturing him alive to try to unleash the nine-tailed beast. Juno confirmed with a tense smile that they expected the unexpected and feared neither death nor pain. A new presence arrived, Kiara. Naruto ordered Kiara to deal with the captive. Kiara nodded and offered to remove his fear, giving a cold, confident smile. Back in the present, Naruto walked with Jiraiya and a small group. Jack, a child in their care, climbed on Naruto and wrapped her arms and legs around him in an affectionate hug, clearly. 2 women, Jalter and Salter, held Naruto's arms, while Bayaban and Morgan walked nearby. They hurried toward a town they hoped to reach quickly. Jack asked when she would get ice cream. Naruto reassured her that they would get it soon. Jiraiya, puzzled, asked Naruto why the child called him mommy. Naruto explained that Jack had no mother who could protect her and that she saw him as a guardian. Jiraiya felt sympathy for the girl and the hardships she had endured. They arrived in town and set out to find Tsunade. Villagers largely ignored the group. The women traveling with Naruto were treated as outsiders. The women made it clear they did not welcome unwanted advances and were more than capable of defending themselves. When they reached a bar, Naruto protested being taken there, and Jiraiya reminded him that Jack could not enter because she was a child. A loud shout from inside sent 2 drunken men fleeing the building. Naruto and the others watched them go as Jiraiya noted that the outburst sounded like Tsunade. The group entered the bar and found Tsunade slumped in a chair, holding a glass of wine and clearly drinking heavily. Tsunade greeted Jiraiya with a rough remark and demanded to know who the others were. Jiraiya told her that the boy with them was her godson, which surprised Tsunade. Nightingale intervened, advising Tsunade to stop drinking because it was harmful to her health. She reminded Tsunade that such behavior was not appropriate to display in front of her godson. After a brief, tense exchange, Nightingale administered a restorative serum to help Tsunade recover, and Naruto and the others watched with mild amusement as the woman steadied herself. Jack, playing at Tsunade's knee, asked the woman her name. Tsunade, still regaining her composure, answered that her name was Tsunade and peered at the child with a mixture of surprise and reluctant fondness. Tsunade asked if the girl was his sister. Jack denied it, introducing herself as Jack and, in a confused way, claiming to be his daughter while calling him her mother. Tsunade was taken aback by what she had heard. Tsunade then said that was fine, glanced back at the others, and asked Jiraiya about Naruto and the newcomers. Jiraiya chuckled and began to explain the situation to her. Time skip. Elsewhere in the forest, 10 figures walked among the trees and found many fallen soldiers strewn across the ground. It was clear they had been violently attacked and none had survived. The group looked around at the devastation. Nagato watched silently. Itachi wondered what had happened. Konan suggested these could be their armies and soldiers. Cheeto expressed his sorrow for the dead. Footsteps approached, and Deidara and Sasori arrived in a panic, reporting that they had found Juno and Zetsu and that they had been killed. The two checked and confirmed the bodies of Zetsu and Juno. Kisame demanded to know what had happened. Deidara said he had seen something in a memory and began to explain what he had witnessed. After hearing the report, the Akatsuki prepared to move out. Their mission was to capture the Jinchuriki who held the nine-tailed beast, Kurama. Itachi thought to himself that the plan was coming together as the Akatsuki moved onward. To be continued. Back in the park, Naruto sat with Jiraiya, Tsunade, and their attendants. They discussed the Akatsuki and the urgent need to stop them. Tsunade and Jiraiya exchanged confused looks as Naruto outlined his intentions. Tsunade asked if he was sure he had a good plan. Jiraiya responded that Naruto knew what he was doing and suggested they watch how he handled his allies. Naruto observed that the Akatsuki were on the move and splitting up. He directed his attendants to locate the Akatsuki members Dara, Haiden, Kahu, Sasori, Konan, Itachi Uchiha, Kisame Hoshigaki, Nagato, Pain, and Obito, naming them as the targets to be neutralized. The attendants acknowledged him and prepared to leave. Jiraiya asked if Naruto had given them specific instructions. Naruto assured him that the attendants would act before their enemies even realized what was coming. Tsunade asked what he meant, and the group prepared to take action. Time skip. Kisame stood in the forest, waiting for the 3 servants the leader had warned him about, told to be cautious. He relaxed until he sensed a sudden presence. Something crashed down nearby with a heavy impact, kicking up earth. A towering figure in dark armor had landed. Kisame noted the new, imposing armor and prepared to engage. The armored warrior let out a feral roar and charged. He lifted a heavy weapon and swung with tremendous force. Kisame blocked with his weapon and shield, but the impact sent him slamming against a building wall. He staggered, evading follow-up strikes and attempting to cut through the thick armor, only to find it held firm. A brutal blow struck him in the midsection, throwing him against another wall. He coughed and tasted metal, dizzy from the hit. As the armored warrior advanced, Kisame reeled, astonished at how strong and resilient these servants were and how the rumors had understated their power. He wondered how they could be so strong. He looked up at Lancelot and readied himself to fight, but then he felt an attack from behind and was sent stumbling toward where Lancelot stood. Lancelot landed a right hook on Kisame, sending the rogue toward another figure. That figure, Yen, followed with a precise roundhouse kick that slammed Kisame into the building wall and left him reeling and coughing. Edmond Dantes appeared and chuckled, noting that Kisame was clearly in pain. Kisame, bewildered, wondered who these newcomers were. Mordred ordered Kisame to get up. He rose, gritted his teeth, drew his twin swords, and charged at the 3 servants, intent on killing them. The 3 servants braced and prepared to overwhelm him with their powers, readying to beat him back. In another part of the fight, Konan stood with her arms crossed and a faint smile, eyes closed. She sensed new arrivals and opened her eyes to find 4 female servants approaching: Carmilla, Skathak, Medb, and Semiramis. Skathak asked if she was Mistral. Konan confirmed her identity. Skathak then explained that the other 3 were servants and the wives of Yn, which made Konan smile. She opened her jacket to reveal a bodysuit and 8 arms, drew a spear, and challenged them to keep up. Scathach produced 2 spears and declared she would show what a true warrior looked like. Without hesitation, Scathach charged at Conan with astonishing speed. Conan, taken by surprise, used her spear to block the rapid strikes. Scathach shifted into an all-out assault, forcing Conan into retreat. In the flurry, Scathach landed a devastating blow that snapped Conan's spear. Conan stumbled back as Semiramis unleashed a powerful blast that sent her soaring away from the skirmish. She cried out as she struck the building and struggled to regain her footing. Carmilla, watching from close by, commented on the scent of Conan's blood with a predatory curiosity and moved in, striking with a clawed attack that struck Conan's torso and left her grimacing in pain. Conan stepped back, stunned and wondering how Carmilla had managed that. Carmilla replied that appearances could come from anywhere and suggested they continue the fight. Conan found herself struggling against the coordinated onslaught of the 3 servants. Elsewhere, Dara stood alone, casually poised on an upper stairwell, waiting for the servants to arrive. When they did, he greeted them with a smirk and noted their presence. The assembled servants included Atlanta, Darius III, Kuga, Achilles, Medusa, and Siegfried. Deidara commented that he was different from what they might expect and claimed to be an assassin. Rama accused him of being allied with Pain, and Deidara admitted he had been hired to eliminate their master and the servants, adding that they would not be able to kill or hurt him. The servants exchanged amused glances. Atlanta taunted him, challenging him to take them down in his assassin style because, she said, he could not defeat them. In response, Deidara dropped a smoke device and moved through the haze, attempting to strike his opponents individually. Kuga, relying on speed and strength, closed in and engaged Deidara, landing heavy blows that tested Deidara's reflexes. Deidara recognized Kuga's speed and tried to counter with a precise slash, but Kuga blocked his attacks and then kicked him hard, sending Deidara crashing into the wall. Medusa stepped forward and assessed Deidara's ability, asking if he could match her speed. She removed her BLNDFLD to reveal glowing purple eyes that radiated a mystic presence. Deidara launched himself at her with a blade in hand, attempting to bring her down, and the 2 clashed in a fast, intense exchange. Juno jumped and then fell to the ground, ending up sprawled and unconscious, unable to stand after a servant had unleashed a powerful noble phantasm. Zetsu had taken many blows and had been trying to dodge everything aimed at him, but 2 saber servants struck him repeatedly and left him reeling from the onslaught. He grimaced in pain as the servants pressed the attack, and rage welled up inside him. He gathered his chakra and released a powerful jutsu blast toward them, but the attack barely affected the servants. The 3 remained standing, unharmed and untouched by his technique. Zetsu screamed in agony and tried to force himself up from the ground despite his wounds. Salter noted that Zetsu was getting up. Carmilla found it interesting that he had survived her noble phantasm. Zetsu declared in a furious outburst that he would kill them all, preparing to attack until Okada arrived and readied his own noble phantasm, intending to finish Zetsu immediately. Deidara, coughing and struggling to rise, acknowledged the display of power around him while watching Medusa move with incredible speed. He produced a smoke bomb and detonated a flash to blind her, then tried to press the attack. Suddenly, something struck him on the right side. Achilles had intervened with his chariot and slammed into Deidara, sending him flying. Achilles then struck with multiple spears that seemed to tear his form apart, and he laughed at what had appeared to be an easy fight. Even so, Deidara revealed that he was still intact in some way. The scattered pieces of his form reconnected, surprising Achilles, Medusa, and Darius III and prompting Achilles to wonder aloud what Deidara really was. Deidara asserted that he was something beyond their expectations and could not be killed by ordinary weapons. Meanwhile, Siegfried watched as Moonsun released a wave of power against 6 servants. Both men dodged as Deidara attempted to detonate explosive constructs that threatened the battlefield. Deidara taunted his opponents with laughter and declarations that they could not stop him. Siegfried warned him not to become overconfident. Then the servant prepared his sword and unleashed his noble phantasm in response. Deidara shouted in surprise as he saw buildings crumbling around him. He had pushed his gravity ability too far and knocked the nearby servants off balance. He glanced at Moon-sun and wondered what could have caused so much destruction. The move that had leveled a dozen buildings while he was using his power did not fit any technique he knew. He watched the 6 servants fall into combat stances and braced himself. Naruto sat on a log, loosening up a little, when he sensed 6 powerful presences approaching. He smirked and readied a revolver and a shotgun, standing with the servants who were prepared to defend him. Artoria informed him that the attackers had arrived. Naruto said he had expected them and rose from the log to face the newcomers: Itachi, Hayden, Pain, Obito, Sasori, and Kazu. Itachi noted where Naruto was. Naruto recognized Itachi as Sasuke Uchiha's brother, the last of the Uchiha, which surprised the Akatsuki and caught Itachi off guard. Hayden observed that someone had discovered them. Obito was taken aback by how much Naruto had grown. Sasori declared that Naruto was surrounded. Naruto answered that he only saw 6 of them and prepared to take up his spear, determined to learn the truth about who was trying to destroy the world. Kakuzu challenged Naruto's claim that the world was being destroyed. Itachi attempted to call Naruto to come with them, but Naruto suspected they intended to release the 9-tailed fox and said he would not allow it. He vowed to stop them. Hayden sneered that Naruto was courting a death wish. Obito asked whether they would make this easy or hard. Naruto replied that he already had allies and they would defeat the Akatsuki. Suddenly, spikes erupted from the ground. The servants leapt aside to avoid the attack, but then an unseen strike hit several of them from behind and they staggered. Itachi turned and saw a group of servants approaching Vlad III, Kali, Astolfo, Ozymandias, Billy the Kid, Hippolyta, Artemis, and Orion, each radiating a formidable aura. The Akatsuki could feel the dangerous power emanating from them and braced for battle. Vlad III declared that they would not allow the attackers to take their master. Orion warned that this time the Akatsuki would fall. Artemis vowed not to let their master be used as a puppet or weapon and said they would end the threat. Ozymandias challenged them to face their defeat. The Akatsuki members readied themselves for combat. Ozymandias unleashed a blast that the Akatsuki dodged. Itachi, Kazu, and Pain engaged Vlad III, while Obito and Sasori confronted the other servants, each side clashing with fierce, fast-paced strikes and counters. As the 3 Akatsuki members prepared to meet another assault, a new danger arrived. Hesshin Lobo charged onto the field at the perfect moment. Kakuzu shouted at the sudden arrival. The Akatsuki readied themselves to fight 2 additional opponents. Hesshin Lobo struck first, sweeping with a blade-like weapon that forced them to dodge. A wolf-like attack lunged toward Kazu, but it proved to be an illusion. A clone had been used to feint the assault. Kakuzu landed and began to prepare a technique to retaliate, while Hesshin Lobo pressed the attack without hesitation. Kakuzu was struck by a flurry of blows and collapsed. Itachi watched in surprised silence as the body hit the ground. Pain looked at Kakuzu without any visible emotion and dismissed him as pathetic. Itachi reacted angrily and moved to strike Pain, but Vlad III interrupted with a dry cough and an observation that Jiraiya had been right. Pain seemed to feel neither pain nor emotion. Pain chuckled and claimed he feared nothing. He insisted his actions would reveal the truth and nothing could stop him. Vlad III's eyes glowed a faint purple. Vlad III asked if that was really Pain's best. Pain stood his ground, then suddenly employed a jutsu and charged. Vlad III only smirked, clearly amused to see a mere mortal make such an effort. Spikes of power erupted from Vlad III and drove into Pain, pinning him to the ground. Pain rose slowly, extracting the spikes, and confirmed that he could not feel pain and claimed he had no soul, vowing to kill Vlad III with his power. Pain attempted another charge, but Vlad III's spike struck again and left him staggered and defeated. Pain stammered, looked toward Itachi and then collapsed. Itachi took the moment to slip away while Vlad III watched him leave. The other servants moved in to subdue the remaining Akatsuki members. Elsewhere, Naruto fought alongside the servants, and together they pressed the assault on the Akatsuki. Naruto and the servants became a coordinated force against Sasori and Obito. Naruto waited for the right moment, then used his spear and drew his katana to strike, sending Sasori and Obito reeling to the ground. Naruto called for Orion. Orion nodded and prepared a new attack. The two unleashed a combined Noble Phantasm against Sasori and Obito. The blast from Orion's Noble Phantasm struck Sasori with overwhelming force and left him defeated on the battlefield. Obito cried out in alarm as Sasori collapsed, clearly defeated. Callie reminded Obito that she was still in the fight and prepared to unleash her own Noble Phantasm. Obito was blasted and was lucky to survive. He crawled away, attempting to escape, when Ozymandias appeared and ordered his servant to prepare the Noble Phantasm. The attack struck Obito, throwing him to the ground. He screamed in pain and struggled to rise, trying to leave immediately. Astolfo warned the others that Obito was running. Naruto urged them to let him go, saying that Obito would always come back. Astolfo agreed, and the group watched him retreat. Back to Kisame. Kisame lay on the ground, his swords broken and his body badly bruised. He forced himself up, coughing and breathing hard, and glared at the three newcomers, furious that they thought they could kill him. Mordred declared that he was outmatched. Kisame spat an angry retort and charged at Yen, who answered with precise, brutal martial arts strikes that quickly overwhelmed him. Yan's assault sent Kisame stumbling toward Lancelot, who grabbed him, slammed him down, and pounded him with heavy stomps. The attackers continued to wear him down, throwing him between them until a blue fireball struck, launching Kisame into a tree and knocking him down again. He shouted that he would always return, but Mordred, losing patience, seized him and drove him back into the fray. Edmond Dantes stepped forward and unleashed a fierce blaze that forced Kisame to cry out as the pressure of the attack consumed him. Kisame insisted he could not be killed, but Mordred and the others had had enough. Edmond Dantes coldly announced that he had had enough of Kisame's defiance. Mordred agreed that the man had talked too much. Yen suggested returning to their master, but Mordred refused, insisting that Kisame needed to face his enemies and that this was his fight to avenge his friends and his losses. The others were told to retreat and make their way back on their own before the situation worsened. Back to Konan. Konan managed to push herself up and took shallow, painful breaths. She steadied herself and looked toward the four servants standing over her. Semiramis ordered Carmilla and Meb to take the next turn. Carmilla advanced and unleashed her Noble Phantasm toward Mistral. Konan screamed in pain as the impact sent her to the ground. She struggled to rise and tried to steady herself, preparing for the servants' next moves. Konan was overwhelmed and rendered helpless by the servants' coordinated attack. Carmilla moved in to subdue her while the others pressed the advantage. Afterward, the queens began arguing over who would claim credit for the victory, their bickering filling the tense air as the group recovered and planned their next move. Back to Deidara. Deidara laughed and taunted the servants, convinced he was unstoppable and could not be caught by the wind. He manipulated the battlefield, tearing structures free and hurling them down in a show of reckless might. The servants dodged and responded, frustrated by his arrogance as he continued to unleash destructive attacks. Kuga appeared beside Deidara and struck, driving a spear into him and sending him crashing against a building. Deidara reeled from the blow as Kuga prepared his own Noble Phantasm, and in an instant the battlefield shifted as a transformation began to take hold. Deidara cursed and used his power to separate the spear from himself, then tried to move but found he could not. He looked up and saw Medusa standing there, fixing him with her mystic eyes, and holding him in place. Darius III activated his Noble Phantasm aimed at Deidara, and Deidara felt genuine fear of the death closing in. Deidara screamed in pain as Darius's attack struck him, and then Medusa's blast hit. The combined force hurled him through a building wall and sent him crashing to the ground. He lay there gasping, stunned and furious, realizing for the first time that the servant's powers could actually harm him. He knew he had to escape. Across the courtyard, Atlanta prepared her own Noble Phantasm and watched the struggling attacker crawl away. She unleashed a storm of spectral arrows that pinned him down and pummeled him, forcing him to scream and frantically try to pry the volleys free while using his power to patch himself up. Despite the pain, he kept trying to get away. From behind, Achilles taunted him, asking where his bravado had gone and telling him he was not a god but a weak man, and that it was time for him to meet up with his friends. After the Noble Phantasm concluded, The enemy collapsed without responding to Rama. He realized the servants appeared fragile at first glance but moved with unusual speed and strength. Deidara reacted in stunned disbelief and asked who they were. Achilles replied with a cold confidence that they were not to be underestimated and that their true power would remain unknown. For a moment both men thought the confrontation was over, but more shinobi arrived and the servants prepared to clear them away. Itachi and Obito were rapidly overwhelmed and defeated by YN and the servants in a swift, decisive exchange. A short time later, Naruto and the others, having finished their duties, escorted Tsunade back to the hidden leaf with the intention of restoring her leadership. On the way, Tsunade witnessed the servants confronting members of the Akatsuki. The servants fought relentlessly and routed their opponents in a high-energy, anime-style clash without graphic detail. Back in the Hokage seat, Tsunade sat for a moment and exhaled, taking in the village and its shifting balance of power. She thought to herself that Naruto's servants were frighteningly strong and that she did not want to be tested by them. Naruto, his expression hardening, reported that Sasuke had escaped. He explained that Sasuke had taken a scroll and turned traitor, and that he was now using that power to confront his brother, Itachi. Tsunade was taken aback by this revelation. Before she could probe further, Serenity arrived accompanied by Hasan of 100 Faces. Serenity informed Tsunade that Sasuke was gone. Naruto added that Sasuke had already slain several Umbu officers and was pursuing vengeance for his clan, intent on confronting his brother. The next morning, Tsunade met with the village council to discuss Sasuke's betrayal and the threat he posed. Counselor 1 proposed a hard line: have Naruto and his so-called servants eliminate Sasuke. Other counselors reacted with shock and outrage at the suggestion, questioning the wisdom and morality of such an order. Counselor 1 insisted that Sasuke had gone too far and needed to be punished, invoking the need to honor past leaders and the safety of the village. Tsunade hesitated but agreed to consider the proposal and prepared to speak with Naruto. As she left the council chambers, Jiraiya was waiting outside and asked why she looked so grave. Tsunade told him that the council intended to move to eliminate Sasuke. Jiraiya resolved to inform Naruto of the council's stance. Naruto walked alone in the street until Fran stepped in and took his arm, overprotective and determined to keep the villagers from harming him. She made sure a summoned creature remained at Naruto's side. Fran reminded Naruto, silently and steadfastly, that she would not let him out of her sight and intended to check on him right away. Naruto thanked Fran for standing with him. Fran hummed and kept holding his arm as they walked. Hinata joined them and took Naruto's left arm, wanting to stay close. Hinata noted that Naruto seemed calm, and Naruto explained that he felt calm so long as he was not being threatened by anyone trying to kill him. Hinata smiled. A servant who had been trailing behind eventually stepped forward to follow the group. She was an Oni named Shuten Doji, part demon and quietly devoted to her master. Shuten chuckled to herself and watched as Naruto enjoyed spending time with his companions. As they moved through Konoha, civilians looked on as the blonde boy and his attendants passed by. Hinata asked if Naruto was hungry. Naruto replied that he was and suggested going to the ramen shop Ichiraku, hoping it was open. Fran stayed close, humming softly. Tamamo suddenly appeared and shouted that she wanted to eat with her master. She hugged Naruto and rested her head against his shoulder, eager to join him for a meal. Naruto greeted her warmly. Tamamo leaned in for a brief, affectionate kiss, which made Fran and Hinata a little jealous. Fran responded with a playful, teasing expression. Nero and Salter arrived and made it clear they also wanted time with Naruto. The group took seats at Ichiraku. The ramen shop owner's daughter, Ayam, stepped outside and was surprised to see Naruto accompanied by several outsiders. She realized Naruto was alive and noted to herself that his companions were striking. Naruto placed an order for 13 bowls of ramen. Ayam nodded and told her father, who set to work preparing the food. The old man became emotional at seeing Naruto eating with his attendants. They ate and felt much better afterward. Although servants were not usually supposed to eat, they still enjoyed the meal and it helped restore their energy. Footsteps approached and everyone turned to see Jiraiya and Tsunade arrive. Naruto acknowledged them. Jiraiya said they needed to speak with him. Naruto guessed that the mission involved Sasuke. Jiraiya confirmed that it did. Tsunade explained that the council wanted Sasuke stopped before he could release anyone from a forbidden scroll. She added that reports suggested Itachi or Obito might have resurrected someone dangerous, Madara. The news sobered Naruto and his companions. Naruto listened as they sat down to discuss the situation. Some time later, a dark figure watched from the trees. He observed Naruto and his companions speaking with Jiraiya and Tsunade. The figure was an ancient, self-styled immortal he called the troll vampire, Zelretch. He muttered that the boy seemed smarter and stronger now and hoped the allies would unite before a looming threat from the Shadow Man endangered other worlds. Obito, meanwhile, hid in a quiet place working to bring someone back. He concentrated on resurrecting Madara and refused to fail. Obito turned his head to watch the ritual. The situation had begun. He channeled his chakra into a powerful jutsu to summon something vast. He told himself he was almost finished, and when the technique completed, a figure stepped out of the darkness and revealed itself as Madara. Madara declared that he was finally free. Obito confirmed that the plan had worked. Madara asked where he was and what had happened, and Obito explained everything Madara needed to know about the mission ahead. After listening, Madara donned samurai armor and instructed Obito to remain and prepare the jutsu and ritual while he went out to find a Jinchuriki. Obito acknowledged the order and watched as Madara left. He then focused on the plan and began working quickly. Time passed. Sasuke continued his path of vengeance, determined to find and confront the man responsible for his family's destruction. He moved forward alone, intent on tracking down Itachi and prepared to hunt him with the power he had gained from the stolen scroll. He refused companions or distractions. His sole aim was to avenge his clan. When Sasuke reached his destination, he entered and saw Itachi seated on a throne, waiting. Itachi called his name and rose to face his brother. Sasuke accused Itachi of murder and betrayal and prepared to settle the score. The two brothers assumed their fighting stances and the confrontation began. The two brothers stood facing each other, breathing hard, each turning his head to meet the other's gaze. Tension thickened between them. Both were ready to fight and to speak. Itachi learned the full truth from Sasuke and felt the need to reach his brother. He did not want Sasuke to slide further into darkness alone. Itachi accused Sasuke of betraying his friend and his allies just to provoke a confrontation between them. Sasuke answered that he intended to kill Itachi. Itachi insisted it was not his fault and argued that he had taken terrible actions to protect Sasuke. Sasuke spat back that Itachi was a traitor. At that moment both brothers sensed reinforcements approaching. Itachi warned that Naruto and his allies were closing in. Sasuke replied that he would not stop until Itachi was dead. They squared off, ready to clash. Suddenly an impact erupted from the ground. The brothers leapt aside to avoid a blast and landed, scanning the area. Two figures had appeared, and Naruto and his allies had arrived as well. A tall, dark presence spoke, observing that Sasuke and Itachi were still brothers, locked in a cycle of pain and vengeance. The figure revealed himself as King Hasen, and beside him stood Asterios. As Sasuke lunged at Itachi, King Hasen intercepted him, grabbing his head and throwing him back into the trees. Asterios turned toward Itachi and moved to prevent him from intervening. Asterios declared that Itachi would go nowhere. Itachi pushed past, insisting that his brother mattered and he had to act, but Asterios swung a heavy weapon like a hammer. Itachi dodged and prepared a jutsu to strike back. Asterios charged like a bull, horns lowered, forcing Itachi to evade and leap away. Itachi attempted to stab with a kunai, but the blade shattered on impact. Asterios seized the opening, slamming Itachi into a tree and driving him back with brutal, overwhelming force. Asterios summoned twin axes and closed in relentlessly. Itachi cried out as he was driven to the ground, rocked by the onslaught. He was battered and struggling. His techniques and weapons were finding no purchase against Asterios' overwhelming power. Time and again Asterios struck with relentless force, sending Itachi crashing through the undergrowth and back against the earth. Bruised and winded, Itachi tried to rise, but Asterios bore down on him with unyielding momentum. Asterios prepared to unleash a powerful noble attack. A short, tense pause followed as everyone braced for the next move. Itachi lay unconscious on the ground. The servant hesitated to kill him because their master had ordered that the enemy be kept alive. Sasuke faced execution at the hands of Naruto and the assembled servants. Asterios seized the man who had attacked them and bound him securely, making sure he could not escape. Sasuke stood opposite King Hasen, who used his power to project fragments of memory and dread into Sasuke's mind. The visions washed over him like a tide, disorienting and relentless. Under that pressure, Sasuke was forced back, struggling to steady himself as the haunting images distorted his thoughts. The assault on his senses felt like a storm. He staggered and fell to his knees. Kneeling, Sasuke let out a stifled cry as memories of his parents, his family, and Itachi overwhelmed him. The revelation that Itachi had been acting under orders and had carried out a grim duty added a fresh weight to his grief and rage. Naruto approached and called Sasuke by name, telling him that this had gone too far and that he had to stop him. Sasuke, consumed by sorrow and fury, insisted that he would not stop until he saw Itachi's body and vowed to confront Naruto and his allies. Naruto sighed and said they had to end it now. The servants readied themselves: Jalter, Salter, Artoria, Jean, Temamo, Mordred, Jack, Siu, Amiya, a knight of the Round Table, and Ushiwakamaru stood prepared. With a roar, Sasuke charged at them. To be continued. Meanwhile, Madara ran across the field in pursuit of the Jinchuriki, desperate to claim the power of the nine-tailed fox, Kurama. He pushed himself faster and faster, certain that that power would make him unstoppable. As he ran, a sudden instinct warned him of danger. He dove aside and hit the ground when a sword struck the earth where he had been moments before. He turned and saw a lone figure standing nearby, presence radiating authority and readiness. A golden aura flared, and the figure revealed himself in gleaming armor, adorned with countless weapons. The kingly figure known as Gilgamesh stood with arms crossed, his expression imperious and unyielding. Madara demanded to know who he was and tried to force his way toward the Jinchuriki, declaring his intention to change the world with Kurama's power. Gilgamesh answered with scorn for anyone who would seize treasure and power without right, warning that Madara's ambitions would be cut down. Madara proclaimed his identity and his resolve, but Gilgamesh would not be moved. He opened golden portals and unleashed a volley of weapons that swept toward Madara. The Uchiha darted and twisted, narrowly avoiding strikes as Gilgamesh's arsenal rained down. The two clashed in a dazzling exchange of swift, cinematic attacks, each testing the other's speed and strength in a fierce, high-energy duel that tore across the battlefield. Their battle continued, a fierce collision of wills and power, the field shaken by every exchange. To be continued. Madara tried to dodge and ran straight at Gilgamesh, intent on taking him down with his bare hands. He unleashed a jutsu and threw kunai, only for Gilgamesh to form a golden portal that blocked the attacks. Gilgamesh taunted Madara, declaring that the king could not be killed. Madara responded with a fierce retort, then ran ahead alone, leapt, and flew up toward Gilgamesh. He struck with a punch, but Gilgamesh narrowed his eyes and sent a weapon through a portal that struck Madara's side, wounding him. More golden portals opened and launched swords and spears that drove the ninja into the ground. Madara crashed down, badly hurt, and struggled to rise while trying to control the bleeding. Gilgamesh mocked him again, and Madara growled his hatred and anger. Seeing the damage to his own body, Madara demanded to know who had sent Gilgamesh. Gilgamesh answered that Madara had been searching for the Jinchuriki. Madara realized the fox was behind this and accused Gilgamesh of being sent by it. The servant bowed in confirmation. Madara formed another jutsu and expelled a stream of flame toward Gilgamesh, but the king's golden shield absorbed the assault. Gilgamesh dismissed the attack with a smirk. Madara then leaned against a rock before springing up and preparing to strike with his sword, but Gilgamesh released more swords that blasted him against the stone. Madara swore in fury as Gilgamesh extended chains that wrapped the ninja, binding him so escape was impossible. Gilgamesh's servant lunged with a spear that struck Madara's chest. Madara attempted to create a duplicate to counterattack, but Gilgamesh warned that a duplicate should not try to strike from behind. A chain then lashed out, catching and wrapping Madara's leg and slamming him through the trees. Gilgamesh declared that this would be the end for Madara, accusing him of causing another's suffering and saying that the Jinchuriki had already been touched by a woman. Madara demanded to know who she was, but Gilgamesh only chuckled and asked if he had any last words, asserting that this time Madara would not return. Madara vowed he would not give up until he had hunted the target down, but before he could finish, Gilgamesh unleashed his noble phantasm. The overwhelming attack struck Madara and brought the confrontation to its conclusion. The blast that had finished Madara left the battlefield silent. Madara was gone. His form had been undone by the overwhelming force, and Gilgamesh, having ensured there was no chance of recovery, stood ready to hunt any remaining Uchiha. An unexpected explosion farther off drew his attention. A streak of purple shot into the sky, and Gilgamesh narrowed his eyes as a newcomer appeared. Gilgamesh hummed to himself and flew forward to investigate. When he arrived, he found a feminine figure rising from the aftermath of a ritual. She carried a strange, potent aura, long white hair, a pale face, a yin-yang symbol on her garments, and a mark on her forehead. Gilgamesh found the sight interesting and watched her as she turned toward the fallen Obito, who lay unconscious nearby. Kagaya announced that she had returned and laughed softly, relieved to be free from the prison that had held her. She felt renewed and intended to reshape the world once more. Gilgamesh observed that it seemed she had been summoned and watched her reaction when he revealed himself. Kagaya chuckled at the sight of a human among them and asked who he might be. Gilgamesh replied that he was Archer. Kagaya introduced herself as Kagaya, the goddess of conflicting emotions and the destruction of mankind. Gilgamesh noted how dangerous she was and prepared to stop her. Adopting his caster form, he struck, and Kagaya was thrown to the ground, clearly surprised and wounded by the attack but not described in graphic detail. As battle flared, other servants appeared to join Gilgamesh: Ishtar, Ereshkigal, Fran, Oda Nobunaga, Siyu, and Enkidu. Gilgamesh declared that they should begin, and the servants moved to confront Kagaya. Fran growled and rushed forward, while Ishtar and Ereshkigal prepared to engage. The group clashed with Kagaya in a fast, intense, anime-style battle, each combatant exchanging powerful strikes and maneuvers without graphic injury. A short time later, elsewhere on the field, a young blonde man stood alone with a katana in his hand. He looked down at Sasuke Uchiha, who lay motionless. Naruto had put an end to the threat. Naruto felt exhausted and regretful for what had been necessary. He acknowledged to himself that Sasuke had gone too far and that it was time to end the conflict. Artoria told Naruto that he had done what needed to be done, offering steadiness and reassurance. Naruto admitted he could hardly believe he had killed his friend with his own hands. Mordred challenged his concern for an enemy, calling Sasuke a betrayer, but Gawain chided Mordred to refrain from pushing their master further. Lancelot reminded Naruto that this was war and that he needed to face reality. Naruto agreed, still weighed by the deed. An explosion in the distance shifted everyone's focus. Naruto and his allies saw that Gilgamesh and his servants were engaged against Kagaya. Jin urged that they withdraw to safety, and Medusa moved to escort Naruto away from the growing battlefield. They guided him to a safer position before the fight reached them. Back with Kagaya, she inspected her hands and laughed softly at her newfound freedom, already planning widespread destruction. Gilgamesh observed that she had been summoned and prepared to confront her again. The assembled servants closed ranks, and the conflict between Kagaya and Gilgamesh's group resumed, the clash promising to determine the fate of the surrounding world. A figure crashed to the ground amid a shockwave of scattered crates. The goddess gritted her teeth and slowly tried to rise, pain radiating through her body from the impact. She wore white with white hair and a pale face. No one knew her true name. She had existed in the world for centuries as one of the first immortals among humans. Her name was Kagaya. Kagaya realized her healing had slowed and cursed under her breath. She forced herself up despite the searing pain from the servants' assault. A heavy strike across her chest delivered by Gilgamesh's forces had wounded her and stoked her fury. She vowed to retaliate against the golden-haired man responsible and his summoned servants. Kagaya cursed Gilgamesh and his monsters, then turned to face the golden-haired man in gleaming armor whose eyes glowed red as he floated with his arms crossed. Gilgamesh chuckled. Enkidu, his old friend, hovered beside him, prepared to stand against the demon queen. Their combined power had battered Kagaya. Another figure floated with them, a young goddess named Oda, goddess of love and hate, who had taken heavy blows and was visibly hurt, coughing in a sign of her injuries. Gilgamesh asked what Kagaya intended to do next. Kagaya declared that she would not let the humans win and vowed to destroy them all. Enkidu inquired what she planned to do. Kagaya announced she would reveal what a true goddess was. Oda laughed and taunted that she was the real goddess and dismissed Kagaya. Enraged, Kagaya shifted into a monstrous form. Several tentacles unfurled from her back as her appearance changed. Kagaya proclaimed that this was her true form and warned that none of them would stand a chance. The three servants laughed and mocked her. Gilgamesh dismissed her as pathetic. Enkidu told her her form would not outmatch them. Oda jeered at her appearance and insisted they were stronger. Kagaya insisted she was Kagaya, goddess of love and hate, and vowed to overrun the mortal world. A dark, cold voice cut through the chaos to say she would not. A towering figure stepped forward, a legendary servant of death, clad in armor with a horned skull helmet and eyes burning blue, his great sword wreathed in azure flame. This was King Hassan. Those present, including Muzan, felt a chill at his arrival. Even Kagaya trembled as if the air itself had turned against her. Gilgamesh stepped back and left King Hassan to confront Kagaya alone. Kagaya wondered why she felt such fear and tried to steady herself. King Hassan addressed Muzan, asking why the so-called demon king seemed afraid and reminding him of his role. Kagaya snarled and charged, vowing to kill them all regardless of their power. King Hassan declared that her slaughter of humans had to end and that he would mete out justice for the victims, including Naruto's family. He immediately unleashed his noble phantasm against her. Kagaya began to speak, but a huge slash struck her, briefly separating her and then immediately reforming her. King Hassan stood and watched, believing his noble phantasm had finished her. Kagaya felt no pain but turned toward King Hassan and emitted a low, hostile growl. Kagaya demanded what he had done. King Hassan observed that she had survived his noble phantasm and prepared another setup for the goddess. Kagaya insisted she was a god and could not die, but before she could finish her protest, another presence intervened. Kagaya turned and saw Fran charging at her, and she unleashed a furious, primal roar. To be continued. Back to Naruto. Naruto watched from above alongside the servants, both groups observing as the assembled servants engaged Kagaya in relentless combat. Naruto thought that the goddess of love and hate seemed immortal and could not be killed, but he hoped the servants could stop her. Mordred smiled warmly and briefly slipped an arm through his, reassuring him that they knew what they were doing. Naruto wondered how Kagaya had survived King Hassan's noble phantasm. There was no answer as Gilgamesh, Siyu, Enkidu, Salter, Kama, Artoria and many others pressed their assault. Salter released her noble phantasm, and Kagaya was struck and sent to the ground. She rose slowly, teeth clenched in anger, eyes fixed on the servants and the Jinchuriki with murderous intent. Kagaya declared that she was still standing. Salter watched in confusion, wondering how Kagaya had survived the attack. Kama then volunteered to try her own noble phantasm and unleashed it to press the assault. Kagaya roared in frustration, surprised that her usual regenerative power was not immediately countering the attacks. She struggled to get up, furious and increasingly strained. Kama observed that Kagaya appeared wounded. Artoria suggested there must be a weakness somewhere. Gilgamesh scoffed at Kagaya's audacity and suggested she was asking for her end. At that moment, one of the 100-face assassins landed among them and stepped forward to try his skill. He targeted Kagaya and activated his noble phantasm. The subsequent strike staggered Kagaya. She gasped, clutched at her chest, and dropped to a knee, visibly weakened and struggling to remain upright. The servants noted her toughness but acknowledged she had been severely tested. Gilgamesh remarked that she still was not dead. A new voice then offered to handle the goddess, surprising the gathered servants. The primordial figure who stepped forward revealed herself to be Tiamat, the mother of all. The servants instinctively stepped back to allow the primordial goddess to act. Tiamat declared that she would not let Kaguya destroy the world and all her children, including Naruto. With her eyes glowing a fierce purple, she prepared her most devastating noble phantasm. Kaguya, bewildered and weakened, tried to ask who the newcomer was, but Tiamat unleashed a powerful noble phantasm accompanied by a thunderous roar and struck at the goddess of love and hate. To be continued. After they finally defeated Kaguya, the goddess dissolved into dust and drifted away. Naruto realized with a jolt that they had overlooked Obito. He told the others they had to pursue him at once, and together they captured Obito and later apprehended Itachi as well. Both would face the consequences for their actions. Time skip. Back in Konoha, Naruto and his companions returned to deliver the prisoners. The crowd cheered, recognizing Naruto as a legend who had carried the burden of their protection for so long. Sakura arrived, frantic and desperate for news of Sasuke. Naruto told her plainly that Sasuke was gone and that they had ended his life. Sakura collapsed into shock and grief, screaming that it could not be true. Fellow students moved to restrain her, but she broke free and lashed out. Artoria stepped in to block the blow and Jean placed her spear to Sakura's throat to stop her. Scathach warned Sakura not to act rashly. Jean explained that what had been done had to be done. Sakura insisted that Sasuke should have been given a second chance. Naruto answered that Sasuke had crossed a line from which there could be no return, and that putting him out of his misery had been the only option. Artoria defended Naruto, insisting he was not a monster but someone who punished evil when necessary. Sakura was released, sobbing and inconsolable. There was nothing left to be done. Epilogue. Naruto visited the graveyard to see his parents, Minato Namikaze and Kushina Uzumaki. Snow fell softly around him as he stood before their stones, lost in thought. He hummed quietly until he felt an arm slip through his, and he turned to find 3 attendants at his side: Jean Lily, Nursery Rhyme and Jack. They offered comfort and concern for his well-being, and Naruto explained that he had come to pay his respects. The attendants did their best to lift his spirits. Soon Elizabeth Bathory, Tamamo Mae, and Nero arrived to join them. Naruto, still thoughtful, suggested they take a moment to celebrate life rather than dwell only on loss. They agreed, smiling, and the group spent time together, talking and enjoying each other's company. The servants made friends with some of Naruto's old allies, and the villagers showed renewed respect as order and stability returned to their lives. Jiraiya called out to Naruto and his colorful companions, and Naruto saw Jiraiya and Tsunade standing together, pleased to see Naruto surrounded by a family of his own. Itachi and Obito served their sentences and, 6 years later, were released. They returned to the Uchiha clan to reckon with what had happened. Sakura, unable to overcome her grief, withdrew from her home and chose to be alone for a time. In the years that followed, Hinata and Naruto became partners and were later married. Several of the servants expressed a desire to remain close to Naruto and support him in his new life. Life settled into a new, if imperfect, peace. The story closed on a quiet, hopeful note. Wounds had been inflicted and consequences paid, but Naruto had friends, allies, and a family to move forward with, and he would continue to protect what mattered to him. The end. In the credit ending, 3 figures stood at the head of their servants, facing a new threat: the Shadow Man. The trio Naruto, Tanjiro, and YN were the protagonists, masters of humanity and its heroes. Naruto asked if everyone was ready. Tanjiro answered with a fierce shout, urging them forward. YN issued a battle cry and led the group into action. They and their servants surged forward to confront waves of undead soldiers, monsters, and demons in a fast-paced, anime-style clash filled with acrobatic maneuvers and flashing energy. No graphic injuries were shown. The conflict played out as stylized combat and coordinated teamwork. The Shadow Man watched from the shadows and smirked slightly. The end.